In the Holy Lilian Kingdom, a furious crowd gathered at the public execution site, their voices rising in a deafening chorus. "Kill her! Kill! Burn in hell! You damn devil! Kill the traitor!" they screamed, their faces contorted with rage and hatred. Above the clamor, a young woman, Marie Auvergne Lilian, lay prone on a raised platform, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. She questioned why this was happening to her, as two stern guards looked on from below. Tears streamed down her face, her expression a mixture of disbelief and profound sorrow. She was Marie Auvergne Lilian, the second princess, now facing the wrath of her own people. The accusations against her were relentless. She had brought ruin to the honorable name of the royal family, disturbed the morals of the palace, and leveraged the kingdom's wealth for her own personal interests and desires. Prison officer Lefine, a woman with a stern demeanor, held a document detailing the princess's fate. She declared that Marie would be stripped of her position as a princess and executed immediately thereafter. The crowd continued its bloodthirsty chant, demanding her death. The 17th generation king, Gaius Auvergne Lilian, had personally ordered this execution, a decree that some in the crowd denounced as tyranny. As the reality of her impending death settled in, Marie questioned why she, once hailed as the princess of miracle for her divine beauty, righteous character, and brilliant mind, was now facing such a fate. She remembered a time when she was celebrated, a time when she was Her Majesty Marie Auvergne Lilian. Yet, the cries of tyranny from the crowd echoed, forcing her to confront the stark contrast between her past glory and present condemnation. Lefine, observing Marie's distress, challenged her, asking what she had said and urging her to refer to her own memories. She prompted Marie to ask herself the same question, reminding her of the things she had done in the past. Marie's memories flooded back, revealing a dark history. She recalled sending annoying officials and nagging priests to the gallows on a daily basis, hosting banquets of debauchery, and using her money and status to buy all the pretty men within the capital. Her reflection continued, a wave of shame washing over her as she remembered stomping on the faces of the poor beggars she encountered. A chilling realization dawned upon her. What have I, she thought, grappling with the enormity of her past actions. She heard prison officer Henri declare that her past actions were merely a given for a princess, and that these were her final words. Marie, in utter disbelief, questioned if she truly had no clue why this was happening. Henri then gave the chilling order to commence the execution. As Henri allowed a smirk to play on her lips, two other women, one with dark hair and another with blonde, looked on with expressions of profound shock and protest, unable to accept the unfolding events and desperately calling for a halt. A swift, brutal chop echoed through the air, followed by a violent splatter of dark liquid, signifying the grim completion of the execution. The grand, ornate palace stood under a cloudy sky, its majestic facade a stark contrast to the violence that had just occurred, as a faint, pained sound escaped from within its walls. Marie awakened with a terrified scream, her eyes wide with horror. She sat up abruptly on a lavish sofa, disoriented and confused, wondering aloud where she was. A maid quickly approached, addressing her as Your Highness. Emil Tourzel, Marie's diligent servant and secretary, stood before her, holding a formidable stack of documents. He inquired if she was feeling unwell, noting that she appeared to have fallen asleep on the sofa. He then explained that while it might be an inopportune moment, there were numerous complaints from the citizens addressed directly to her, Princess Marie. Marie then burst into relieved laughter, the realization dawning on her that the execution was merely a dream. She declared with absolute confidence that there was no way she would ever allow herself to be exposed so disgracefully, asserting that people simply envied her. She continued to laugh, boasting that she was truly terrified by her own beauty and talent, and that with her excellent crisis management skills, she could easily avoid such a predicament. Emil Tourzel, however, merely let out a quiet sigh, seemingly accustomed to her princess's boundless arrogance. 1 year later, a furious crowd had gathered outside a formidable stone building, their voices rising in a cacophony of rage, shouting, "Kill her! Kill! Kill!" Marie's severed head, still adorned with a small crown, lay on a platter, her eyes wide and staring upwards. The enraged crowd continued to hurl insults, calling her a traitor and a devil, demanding she burn in hell. She awoke with a gasp, her eyes wide with terror, a soft, drawn-out sound of fear escaping her lips. The horrifying vision continued, as if a memory or a premonition, showing Lefine Henri accusing her before a crowd. Henri declared that Marie had leveraged the kingdom's wealth, disturbed the palace's morals, and ultimately brought ruin to the royal family, all for her own personal interests and desires. Marie, still trapped in the nightmare, lay prone on the chopping block of a guillotine, her body trembling. She realized with a chilling certainty that these were the exact words and developments she had experienced in her previous dream, prompting her to wonder if the same time period was repeating itself. The blade fell, and a splatter of blood marked the grim end, while a grand castle stood in the distance. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated, and her mouth was agape in a horrifying scream, sweat beading on her forehead as the terror consumed her. Marie jolted awake on a sofa, disoriented and gasping for air. From nearby, Emil Tourzel's voice broke through her panic, addressing her as Your Highness. Emil Tourzel, holding a precarious stack of documents, looked at Marie with a concerned expression, asking if she was feeling unwell. Marie, still on the sofa, looked up at Emil. Emil explained that Marie seemed to have fallen asleep on the sofa and inquired if she had been having a nightmare or something similar. She added that there were many complaints from the citizens today, and while it might be bad timing, she needed to address them. Marie's expression shifted to one of deep thought, a realization dawning upon her. She continued to gaze at Emil, who stood with her back to the viewer, near a small table laden with books. Marie's face was etched with a profound concern, as if a critical piece of information had just clicked into place. Marie finally understood. The time had rewound exactly 1 year to the moment before her execution. She realized that if she spent her time carelessly, she would inevitably find herself on the chopping block again the following year, for some unknown reason. Her eyes widened with renewed terror, and she vehemently rejected the idea of returning to that chopping block once again. She would not allow it. She reflected on the painful experience of her execution, realizing the claims of it being a humane device were a lie. The thought of enduring such a terrifying ordeal again filled her with dread. Her thoughts then turned to the citizens, who seemed to despise her immensely, though she still could not comprehend the reason for their profound hatred. Despite the countless complaints she had read, she believed her life as a royal had been lived appropriately, making the resentment feel entirely unfair. If her demise was truly caused by this, she resolved to become a princess beloved by her people, believing that all would then end well. 1 year later, her fate awaited. There, her head was once again secured within the guillotine, her expression a mix of surprise and a dawning, grim understanding. As the blade loomed, she screamed in anguish, questioning why this was happening again when she had strived to be a princess loved by her people, having read all their complaints. In a desperate attempt to alter her destiny, she declared that this time she was doing things correctly. She abruptly dismissed all her servants, ordering them to return to their families, harshly calling them trash and proclaiming them free. Yet, the people's hatred persisted, and the guillotine's blade fell once more. Another year passed. Again, she found herself trapped in the guillotine, screaming in disbelief as money rained down around her. Below, the citizens continued to shout, demanding she heed them and calling her talentless poor folks. She then began to shower the crowd with more money, proclaiming she was gracing them with wealth and that they were welcome to crawl on the ground to collect it all. She believed she had finally avoided her execution and that they would now regard her more favorably. Despite her efforts, the blade descended with a resounding boom. She cried out in frustration, realizing that if the people would not come to like her, then no more tricks would suffice. With a new, desperate resolve, she decided she should have done this from the start. Mounted on a large dog and leading a pack, she declared her intention to gather all the money she could and flee the kingdom, bidding farewell to the simpletons. Another year passed, and her escape began. She found herself once again facing the guillotine, her mind screaming in anguish, questioning why this fate, this end, continued to befall her. What was she supposed to do to change its course? The blade descended with a sickening chop. Moments later, the familiar rumble of a carriage signaled the reset of her cursed timeline. Inside, Emil Turzel, her loyal servant, rode with a concerned expression, observing the passing scenery. He noted her extreme exhaustion, a stark contrast to her dismissive declaration of being fine. More importantly, he pressed, was the rumor true? Emil confirmed that at least a portion of the capital believed the rumors about that woman to be true, though he still questioned if she was truly there. Deep within a secluded forest, a small, rustic house stood, its windows glowing faintly in the encroaching darkness, rumored to be the dwelling of the mysterious figure. As they approached the isolated dwelling, Emil questioned Marie's sudden interest in superstitions and witchcraft, reminding her that no one believed in such things in this day and age. Marie, however, declared it a simple whim, asserting that the house was rumored to be the hideout of the sorceress, the descendant of a witch. Marie, her eyes sharp, threatened to send Emil to the gallows for speaking falsehoods, causing him to recoil in shock. She then internally acknowledged the strange things happening to her, hinting at her desperation. Inside the house, Emil observed the peculiar items lining the shelves, realizing that even if it sounded sketchy, if people rumored her to be a sorceress, then perhaps it was a supernatural phenomenon that couldn't be explained by common sense. Marie's gaze was fixed, a desperate hope shining in her eyes. She believed this woman would know the way to save her. With a determined expression, Marie confronted the woman, asking directly if she was the rumored witch. The woman, calm and composed, confirmed it with a simple indeed. The sorceress, now identified as Rien Monterey, sat poised and serene behind a draped table, her hands resting near a glowing crystal ball. 2 candles cast a soft light upon her, suggesting a quiet anticipation. She looked directly forward, a knowing smile playing on her lips, and addressed Marie directly, declaring that the princess of debauchery had finally arrived. Marie reacted with a startled gasp, her eyes widening behind her spectacles, as Rien continued, asserting with calm confidence that she knew precisely why Marie had come to her. Princess Marie, looking bewildered, questioned her servant Emil about the witch's cryptic words. The witch, holding a glowing orb, spoke of freeing Marie from the absurdity of her current situation. As the witch gestured with a delicate hand, she continued, explaining that Marie's fate was unfortunately intertwined in countless ways. Marie, standing with Emil, then asked what she needed to do to save herself. The witch elaborated, stating that to break free from her sealed fate, Marie had to untangle herself from troubles with women, all of which were entangled by karma. Marie, still perplexed, admitted she had no idea what the witch was saying. Leaning in close, the witch's intense gaze met Marie's as she urged her to remember her own name, Marie Auvergne Lilian. dismissing the people's anger as irrelevant to her true predicament. Marie's eyes widened in profound shock as the witch delivered a chilling revelation. Someone wished for her death. The princess could only utter a stunned, disbelieving sound. Still surrounded by Emil and other servants, Marie internally struggled with the idea, denying that someone so wicked could be near her. Yet, a disturbing thought began to form in her mind. Her mind raced, recalling various moments from the past, each memory a flash of distress and betrayal. Her face contorted in anguish as she relived them. She remembered a specific person who had always cracked a smile, even amidst the jeering crowd during her execution. That person, she realized, had been present at that very moment. The memory solidified, revealing Emil Torzel, her trusted servant, standing among the onlookers, a subtle, unsettling smile gracing her lips as Marie faced her demise. Marie's eye, now narrowed with a chilling clarity, reflected the profound and agonizing realization of betrayal as a single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Marie, still reeling from the witch's prophecy, was confronted with further unsettling information. Someone was asking her if something was wrong, addressing her as Your Highness, while the narration identified Emil as the loyal servant and palace secretary. Her mind raced, the shocking implication echoing. Emil was aiming for her life. The grand palace loomed in the background, a stark contrast to the turmoil within her thoughts. As she processed this, Marie reviewed documents, confirming the secret investigation's findings. The reports detailed Emil Torzel's unexpected ties to an anti-royalist faction. Marie learned that despite being born into poverty, Emil had diligently pursued her studies from childhood, becoming a prodigy who secured the royal secretary position through her own abilities. Marie continued to delve into the documents, trying to comprehend why Emil would arrange her execution, a move that would pose no problem for her if she allied with the anti-royalist faction. She sought the deeper reason for Emil's hatred. A smirk played on Marie's lips as she uncovered a huge misconception regarding Knight Samuel. She realized this stupid man had been cuckolded by Emil, who was his lover. Marie imagined a future where she could rectify this misunderstanding, envisioning Knight Samuel begging to be her slave, humiliated with a wad of cash. Just as this vengeful fantasy consumed her, a sudden kerchuk sound broke her reverie, and Emil's voice addressed her. Emil, holding a notebook, apologized for disturbing Marie's time, explaining that she wished to discuss the month's schedule, as there were many events requiring detailed planning. Marie's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise in their depths. Emil, noticing Marie's unusual demeanor, asked if something was wrong, or if there was something on her face. Marie hesitated, unable to articulate her recent discoveries. Emil then complimented Marie, telling her she looked absolutely lovely today, as she gently took her hands. Marie gazed back, a complex mix of emotions swirling within her. Emil, caught off guard, could only utter a surprised sound as Marie, with a determined expression, declared that she was merely conveying what she had always thought. Marie then instructed Emil to listen well, stating that she felt like doing so today. Marie continued, emphasizing the depth of Emil's meaning to her. She urged Emil not to hold back, to tell her everything if she harbored any problems or dissatisfaction, promising to listen. Emil, blushing profusely and visibly flustered, tried to excuse herself, claiming she didn't feel well. Marie, however, gently cupped Emil's face in her hands, declaring that she would always be by her side. Marie's internal thoughts revealed her true, calculating intent. To escape execution, she needed Emil to fall for her, to make her forget her resentment. This, she reasoned, was a far easier and more reliable path than reckless killings that would incur the wrath of the people and the powerful. Having made her decision, she resolved to proceed thoroughly. Over time, Marie meticulously worked to cultivate Emil's affection. She observed Emil diligently at work, read to her, and even presented her with a birthday cake, all part of her calculated effort to deepen their bond. Later, as they sat together, Marie expressed her appreciation for the herb tea Emil had prepared, finding it wonderfully soothing before bed. Emil, with a modest demeanor, dismissed her efforts as nothing impressive. Emil, her face flushed and eyes downcast, began to confess to Marie, admitting it was quite embarrassing but that she had been mistaken about her. She revealed that for a long time, she had thought. She continued, begging Marie's forgiveness, explaining that she had been on the verge of doing something cruel. Emil confessed her past perception of Marie as a selfish scoundrel who cared only for sex and money, incapable of understanding the hearts of the people. Internally, she cursed Marie as a bastard. With tears welling in her eyes, Emil declared that at this very moment, she could not even conceive of such actions. She pleaded with Marie to accept her bottomless mercy and her tainted heart, as she began to strip away her clothing. Now partially undressed, Emil lay before Marie, her gaze earnest as she asked if Marie would please purify her body as well. Emil's tearful confession and desperate offer left Marie utterly stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief at the sudden turn of events. Still partially undressed, she insisted she was serious, asking Marie what she thought of this unexpected development. She pleaded for Marie's forgiveness, at least, if nothing else. Emil desperately begged Marie to simply mess up her body, a plea that Marie internally recognized as practically the same thing as her previous offer, causing her further internal conflict. Marie's mind raced, considering the implications. She knew that refusing Emil at this point might reignite her hatred and send Marie back down the path to execution. She mused on how easily Emil had fallen for her, despite having aimed for her life just moments ago, and how she, Marie, was supposed to be a super-duper huge men lover to begin with. She concluded that, given the circumstances, she had no other choice. The intimate moment continued, Marie's golden curls framing the embrace as their lips remained pressed together. Marie held Emil close, their bodies pressed together as they shared a passionate kiss. Emil's arms wrapped around Marie's neck in surrender. Marie pulled back slightly, gazing into Emil's eyes. She gently told Emil to relax her body and heart, assuring her there was no need to be hasty, as she felt the same way. She encouraged Emil to entrust her whole being to her. Later, Marie lay in bed beside a sleeping Emil, a small crown still nestled in her golden hair. She looked up, a thoughtful expression on her face, realizing she had truly gone and done it now. She felt a strange sensation, as if she had lost something she should not have, yet she dismissed the thought, focusing on the present. Meanwhile, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder, their hushed whispers carrying the weight of a grim expectation. They spoke of an execution, a fate that Marie believed she had successfully avoided. The crowd continued to murmur, their faces etched with a mix of curiosity and dread, as the gallows stood stark against the sky. Yet, in her mind's eye, Marie saw herself, smiling serenely as she lay upon the execution block, a crown still adorning her head. The vision intensified, showing Emil in a desperate frenzy, shouting her name and demanding to know why this was happening. He pleaded for them to unhand her, offering to take her place if they insisted on killing her. From the looks of it, he believed this execution was truly happening. This grim reality was not Emil's design at all. It was a fate that seemed to persist despite her efforts. Back in her chambers, she sat, contemplating the grand palace outside and wondering what her next move should be. She pondered if the sorceress had lied to her, for despite making Emil fall for her, her execution still seemed inevitable. She recalled the sorceress's words, that all the troubles were caused by some woman. She corrected herself, remembering the knight's precise words. Her fate was intertwined in countless ways, tangled by the karma of troubles with women. His words echoed in her mind. To break free from this sealed fate, she had to untangle all of them, not just Emil. She questioned if her very life was being aimed for, realizing the prophecy spoke of many other women whose fates were intertwined with hers. The weight of this realization pressed upon her, causing her to grit her teeth in a mixture of frustration and fierce resolve. Her hand clenched into a tight fist, a fierce determination burning in her eyes as she vowed not to lose against the sealed fate tied to all those women around her. With a renewed surge of resolve, she declared her intention to entice all of them, to build a harem, and in doing so, change her fate and break free from this relentless cycle of death. A magnificent castle, adorned with countless spires and grand facades, stood majestically under a cloudy sky, a testament to power and opulence. Within its lavish walls, 3 women lay intertwined in a vast, ornate bed, deep in slumber. The air of tranquility belied the complex emotions brewing within one of them. As dawn approached, one of the women, with elaborate blonde hair, stirred awake. She gazed at the sleeping figure beside her, a subtle smirk playing on her lips as she thought, "I did it." Her smirk widened into a triumphant, almost manic grin, her eyes gleaming with a fierce satisfaction. She clenched her fist, declaring to herself, "This makes it 3. This conquest was not her first. She recalled a previous encounter, a passionate kiss shared with Emil, a moment that marked her initial triumph over the blonde noblewoman. Her path to this point had been arduous, marked by repeated deaths and resurrections. She had died and returned an astonishing 21 times, each time unable to escape the guillotine. Through these cycles, she had identified 2 maids, besides Emil herself, who were connected to her repeated executions. Now, back in the present, she reflected on her recent successes. She had also conquered these 2 maids, and in record time, bringing them into her intimate circle. A soft creak of a door interrupted her thoughts, drawing her attention. She mused internally, acknowledging the terrifying nature of this womanizing talent hidden within her. The door slowly opened further, revealing Emil, who peered in with wide, shocked eyes. Beside her, the 2 maids, now awake, also stared in utter disbelief at the scene before them. The protagonist's confident expression faltered slightly as she observed the unfolding chaos. The 2 maids, completely naked, dashed past Emil, screaming apologies and insisting they needed to do their work. Emil, meanwhile, remained in bed, her face a mask of distress, confirming the protagonist's realization that Emil had become quite possessive. Emil confronted her, her voice laced with a possessive accusation, declaring that the protagonist was the one she loved most, yet also the one who might try to take her life again. The protagonist observed her with a knowing, slightly amused expression. Her face brightened, a blush spreading across her cheeks, her eyes sparkling with heart-shaped pupils, clearly delighted by Emil's possessiveness. She confidently declared that mastering a woman's heart was easy, dismissing Emil's concerns. Emil, still blushing, asked if that was truly so, her expression a mix of doubt and infatuation. With a bold and open expression, she began to shed her clothing, challenging Emil to prove her words with their bodies. Emil reacted with a mix of distress and arousal. Her face flushed, her teeth gritted as she struggled with the intensity of the moment, admitting she could not help herself. The narrative shifted to an exterior view of a grand, ornate residence with a prominent clock tower, indicating a passage of time. The following day, the protagonist sat formally dressed in the Marie residence, her expression serious and contemplative, her determined eyes focused. With a clock face in the background, she thought to herself that there was just 1 minute left. She looked out from a window, a grand clock tower visible in the distance, surrounded by a crowd. She noted the date, October 16th, and the exact time, 12:15, recognizing it as the moment of her past executions. She acknowledged having experienced this countless times, but this time, she felt it was different. She reflected on all she had achieved, the 3 women who had begrudged her, and the conquest she had made. A clock ticked ominously in the background. The clock's hands drew closer to midnight, the ticking growing louder, marking the passage of a crucial moment. She erupted in triumphant laughter, declaring that she had finally surpassed the guillotine end. Her life, she believed, would now be smooth sailing. The ordeal of making women fall for her was over, she proclaimed, having banned herself from such pursuits, for she was, after all, a great lover of men. Just then, a maid interrupted, addressing her as Your Highness. Startled, she demanded to know if someone was there to see her, insisting she was busy with hunting preparation and that the guest should be excused. The unexpected guest was Yuki Yuzuriha, daughter of a count family and a childhood friend of Marie. The princess, recognizing Yuki, instructed Emil to prepare some tea. However, Yuki, stating she had visited without an appointment, turned to leave, suggesting she would return another day. With a subtle movement, Yuki reached out and gently stopped Emil, who looked up in surprise. Yuki then addressed Emil, calling her Little Emil, and softly suggested there was no need to rush. Emil, flustered, blushed deeply. Emil found herself internally confessing that Miss Yuki was making her heart throb, questioning her own thoughts despite her devotion to Her Highness. Yuki held Emil close, a subtle smile playing on her lips. Still captivated by Yuki, Emil gazes at her with adoration. The protagonist, Marie, observes the interaction, noting to herself that Yuki has not changed since she was a child. Indeed, Yuki's androgynous charm and pleasant personality had already captivated the hearts of various women throughout the palace, from nobles to servants. Marie then directly addresses Yuki, inquiring about the purpose of her visit today. Yuki blushes, appearing flustered, and hesitates to call her visit mere business, implying a more personal reason. Marie, taking a sip of tea, reassures her that it is acceptable if she prefers not to elaborate at the moment. Suddenly, Marie bursts with renewed energy, exclaiming her joy and the multitude of things she now wishes to accomplish, wondering aloud if something good has happened. Yuki watches her, a slight smile playing on her lips. Marie then grasps Yuki's hand, declaring that as her dear friend, she must reward Yuki for never having caused her any harm, even during the recurring guillotine events. Several men nearby look on with expressions of surprise. Marie proposes they attend a ball together. Yuki expresses her reluctance, admitting that dancing is not her forte. Marie, however, dismisses her concern, explaining that the dance portion of a ball is merely a front, and it is actually a gathering for women to mingle and encounter each other. Yuki, still hesitant, states she is not interested in such a mixer. Marie, undeterred, insists that as a daughter of a count, she needs to have men orbiting her, emphasizing the social necessity. With a determined expression, Marie declares they will roll, and that such social maneuvering is simply what nobles do. She then pulls Yuki along, who cries out Marie's name in surprise and mild protest. Marie, beaming with excitement, announces that the hunt has begun and urges Yuki forward as they enter a grand hall filled with other nobles. Yuki looks on with a mix of embarrassment and resignation, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Marie proudly declares that her beauty has attracted many men in no time, believing now is the opportune moment to act. Yuki, looking increasingly uncomfortable, thinks otherwise as Marie points out the admiring crowd. She recoiled, a sound of disgust escaping her lips as a suitor extended a hand, not only for a dance but for the entire night. His bushy hand and overly confident smirk filled her with an inexplicable revulsion. Her discomfort intensified as another suitor, with a curly wig and a strong odor, approached. She felt a wave of nausea, wondering aloud what was happening to her, as her former self would never have been bothered by such advances. Surrounded by a throng of men, their rugged body hair and beastly stench became unbearable. The disgust she felt towards the male body was so intense, she could barely stand it, prompting her to question her recently changing tastes. Her thoughts drifted to her ideal partner, someone pristine, with smooth, pretty skin, a slender body, a dignified demeanor, and a gallant figure. As if conjured from her very thoughts, Yuki stood poised and elegant, embodying every aspect of Marie's newly defined ideal. Marie's gaze lingered on Yuki, who stood calmly beside her, a stark contrast to the boisterous men who had surrounded them moments before. A shocking realization dawned on Marie. Yuki possessed every single characteristic of her ideal type. The truth hit her with a profound, almost disbelieving, force. Overwhelmed, Marie gasped, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and confusion. She questioned what was truly happening to her as a carriage waited under the full moon, ready to depart. Later, Marie sat dejectedly beside Yuki, her head bowed in frustration. She couldn't believe she was returning home from the ball without having secured a single suitor, a stark failure for someone like her. She reflected on her past self, who had been a no-questions-asked men lover, hunting for desires without hesitation. To think that her former self would now feel such intense disgust towards the very men she once pursued was infuriating. This sudden change was truly vexing. She found herself in a tense confrontation with Yuki, who leaned in close, her hand gently touching Marie's face. Yuki's internal thoughts revealed a sinister intent. She planned to manipulate Emil and find some form of personal release through it. Yuki then addressed Marie directly, her gaze intense, uttering her name with a subtle inflection. Marie's eyes widened in shock, her heart pounding. She wondered what had come over Yuki so suddenly, a chilling thought dawning on her. Yuki was also involved in something significant, something she couldn't quite grasp. Moments later, Marie was violently ejected from a moving carriage, tumbling out into the night. Her face contorted in terror as she plummeted towards the ground, a scream caught in her throat. She crashed heavily, her body hitting the earth with a sickening thud. Nearby, the carriage wheels continued to spin, and a figure, revealed to be Yuki, stepped into view, her hand already on the hilt of a drawn sword. Yuki stood poised, her sword now fully drawn, its blade glinting in the dim light, her expression unreadable. Marie, still sprawled on the ground, looked up in disbelief, questioning Yuki's actions and calling out her name. Yuki's eye, sharp and cold, stared down at her. Yuki's gaze remained fixed on Marie, the sword held ready, as she declared with chilling certainty that everything was Marie's fault. Marie, now sitting upright but still on the ground, looked up at Yuki, utterly bewildered by the accusation. Yuki, standing over her with the sword, simply uttered a questioning sound. She stood over Marie, sword drawn, her gaze unwavering. Marie, still bewildered, grappled with the sudden, violent confrontation. Internally, she questioned the turn of events, believing she had finally surpassed her guillotine fate. Yet here she was, facing another inexplicable threat. Why? She desperately sought an answer. Still reeling from the shock and the memory of her past fate, Marie could only question her assailant, asking if she was truly going to be killed here, now, after all she had endured. Yuki remained silent, her expression stern and unyielding, as Marie finally recognized her attacker. A wave of disbelief washed over her, and she cried out Yuki's name, pleading for an explanation. The horrifying vision then consumed Marie's mind, her own severed head, eyes wide with shock, floating above her lifeless body. The image was a brutal, visceral reminder of a past execution, a fate she had believed herself to have escaped. Suddenly, the vision faded, and Marie found herself sitting upright on a plush couch, her expression serious and contemplative. The ornate clock beside her seemed to tick away the moments of her profound realization. A wave of frustration washed over her, her eyes narrowing with a mix of anger and determination. She cursed her predicament, the weight of her situation pressing down upon her. Her thoughts then drifted to the cruel irony of her situation. She had indeed escaped the fate of the chopping block, the guillotine, but she had returned to a time where, of all people, Yuki was involved. The very person who had been her executioner. The memory of her brutal end, at Yuki's hand, flashed vividly in her mind once more. She recalled the moment her head was severed, the blood splattering, the sheer horror of being killed in such a way. Overwhelmed by the gruesome recollection, Marie cried out in anguish, her mouth agape in a silent scream. She couldn't believe it. The betrayal was too profound, the memory too real. Yuki, her childhood friend, had been the one to end her life. Her face contorted with a mix of anguish and fury, she grappled with the profound betrayal. Yuki, whom she had believed in, was not just a simple childhood friend, but an irreplaceable, dear friend. The realization of this betrayal cut deeper than any blade. She stumbled, her body collapsing to the checkered floor with a sharp snap. Despite the sudden fall, she internally asserted that this was no problem, dismissing any weakness. Her gaze hardened, a fierce resolve burning in her eyes as she vowed to claim what was hers, even Yuki. This time, she reflected, things would be different from the guillotine. She now knew the identity of her killer, Yuki Yuzuriha. 8 years prior, a young girl named Marie, surrounded by several boys, enjoyed an elegant tea time outdoors. One of the boys remarked on the splendid fragrance emanating from her tea. She smiled, declaring that spending an afternoon with an elegant tea time was simply the best. Meanwhile, another boy nearby reacted with a pained expression, letting out a soft groan. The source of his discomfort became clear. Marie was using one of the boys as her personal chair, sitting directly on his back as he knelt, visibly distressed, while another boy poured her tea. Marie, seemingly oblivious to his suffering, expressed surprise that her chair could speak, then dismissed the thought. The boy beneath her, sweating profusely, cried out about the intense heat, while another boy apologized to Marie for the interruption. Across the grounds, a young Yuki, also 10 years old, observed the scene, recognizing the girl as Marie Auvergne Lilian. He approached Marie, questioning her behavior. He reminded her that a lady ought to be kind towards boys and asked her to cease her actions. Marie, a daughter of a count, looked at him with a hint of annoyance. Marie confidently asserted that the boys' services were rendered by their own volition, drawn to her by her virtue, status, wealth, and beauty. The boys around her enthusiastically confirmed her words, pleading with their beautiful Princess Marie to keep them by her side forever. Yuki, taken aback by the boys' fervent devotion, admitted he had never experienced such treatment from the opposite sex. Marie simply regarded him, unfazed, as the boys continued to shower her with adoration, calling her a peerless and stunning princess. Suddenly, a group of elegant women, led by one in a wide-brimmed hat, excitedly called out to Yuki, expressing their delight at finding him and complimenting his unchanging loveliness. They eagerly pulled Yuki away, promising him new dolls, clothes, and delectable snacks. Marie watched their departure, a look of surprise dawning on her face. Yuki Yuzuriha considered Marie's undeniable charm, which effortlessly drew people to her side. Yet, she mused, the true value of a woman lay in the number of servants she possessed, and that appeal felt meaningless if all those drawn to her were of the same sex. She then found herself facing Marie, who, with a confident air, declared she was bestowing upon Yuki the privilege of becoming her friend. The other women around them looked on, captivated. Yuki's face lit up with joy, and she thanked Marie profusely. She confessed that she had been wanting to ask Marie to be her friend for some time, acknowledging Marie's popularity among the boys. She then declared her own aspiration to Marie, a dream of a wonderful love. Years later, Marie recalled the day Yuki had told her of that dream, a memory that now brought a look of intense determination to her face. As she lay in bed, surrounded by her sleeping maids, Marie silently vowed to fulfill Yuki's dream in the perfect form she wished for. Meanwhile, the grand ball was underway, its opulent architecture a testament to the evening's splendor. Inside the opulent hall, guests mingled and conversed, their murmurs filling the air beneath the glittering chandeliers. Among the guests, two men discussed the evening, one remarking that Princess Marie seemed to be on another level tonight, while the other agreed, acknowledging her usual beauty but noting her exceptional radiance. The subject of their admiration, Marie, then appeared, adorned in a magnificent gown and crown, confidently dismissing the attention with a subtle smirk, as if it were nothing special. She reflected on her immense wealth, realizing it was merely a tool to enhance the inherent beauty she already possessed. With humanity's peak beauty, she resolved to make Yuki fall completely for her. A confident, almost predatory smile spread across her lips, reflecting her unwavering determination. Meanwhile, at the grand ball, several suitors expressed their frustration, complaining that the princess had ignored their invitations to dance. Yuki, observing the scene, remained silent. Suddenly, Marie approached Yuki, extending a hand and asking if she would dance with her. Yuki, surprised but composed, agreed to the invitation, stating she was fine with it. Marie's expression softened slightly in satisfaction. As they began to dance, Marie led with an elegant grace that captivated the entire ballroom, drawing all eyes to their mesmerizing movements. During their dance, Yuki felt a growing sense of frustration, internally declaring Marie's attempt a fail, though Marie herself remained perfectly serene. Yuki struggled with Marie's overwhelmingly gallant presence, feeling she should not allow herself to be conquered. Just then, she stumbled, but Marie swiftly caught her, reassuring her that everything was all right. Marie calmly instructed her to simply follow her lead and not to rush. Yuki, flustered, wondered why she was the one getting so worked up. Still reeling from Marie's overwhelming presence, Yuki internally cursed her as a natural womanizer, yet acknowledged the effectiveness of her charm. She resolved to deploy her own secret weapon, her ace in the sleeve, to counter Marie's advances. Her internal turmoil manifested physically. She felt an intense heat rising within her, a sensation of being utterly overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Marie, keenly observing Yuki's flustered state, subtly adjusted her dress, further exposing her cleavage. This deliberate act caused a stir among the male onlookers, and Marie inwardly mused that no one could possibly resist her allure. Yuki bristled with indignation, angered by Marie's brazenness and her ability to brush aside her own attempts at resistance. Marie, completely unfazed, then offered Yuki a handkerchief, remarking that she shouldn't let the sweat run in the cold night wind. Just then, the music for their dance concluded. Yuki, still internally frustrated that she couldn't make Marie fall for her, thanked her for the wonderful dance. Marie, with a knowing smile, accepted the thanks, believing they had established a good connection. Later, as Marie rode away in a carriage under the moonlight, she smiled contentedly, believing she had successfully averted a terrible fate. The carriage continued its journey, carrying both Marie and a visibly distressed Yuki, who sat beside her. Yuki remained lost in thought, her expression troubled. Marie, noticing her silence, gently inquired if something was on her mind, asking if Miss Yuki was truly present. Marie's gaze was sharp and knowing, her name echoing in the quiet space. Suddenly, Yuki's eyes widened in shock as a realization dawned upon her, recognizing a particular pattern in Marie's actions. Marie tumbled violently from the carriage, a sudden jolt throwing her into the night. A sharp realization pierced her mind. I knew it. Her eyes widened in terror, reflecting the shock of the unexpected fall. The carriage itself then crashed with a sickening crunch, sending debris flying as Marie was flung further, landing with a painful impact. A figure stepped forward, their presence ominous. As the chaos settled, Yuki stood observing, her expression stern. Marie's internal screams echoed, blaming Yuki for the disaster, demanding to know why this was happening. Yuki, however, only wondered about Marie's erratic mood swings. Marie's face contorted in a silent scream, her hands clenching tightly, as if trying to grasp onto reality. Time seemed to rewind, the hands of a grand clock turning back as Marie's clenched fist trembled, a new reality dawning. The scene shifted to the exterior of a magnificent mansion. She cried out in agony, clutching her head as if the pain was far worse than any guillotine. Other figures, maids, also writhed on the ground, sharing her distress. Marie cursed her fate, realizing the immense suffering. Still on her hands and knees, Marie looked up at two maids, a profound realization settling upon her. She had returned to this very day, to this very time. The maids, Lisbella and Carnier, approached cautiously, asking if their princess was all right, if she was good in the head. Marie could only manage a choked sound in response, her foot stomping in frustration. Suddenly, Marie stood tall, her demeanor completely transformed. She declared that there was no problem whatsoever, and, with a confident air, commanded Lisbella to follow her that night. The maids, taken aback by her abrupt shift, could only question her intent. Under the pale glow of the moon, the grand Yuzuriha residence stood silent, its ornate gates closed against the night. From within its walls, Yuki Yuzuriha, with her sleek dark hair and sharp, elegant eyes, prepared to venture out. She moved with a quiet purpose, her figure receding down a cobbled alleyway, leaving the residents behind under the cloak of darkness. Unbeknownst to Yuki, two figures, Marie and her attendant, observed her departure from behind a wooden wall, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Earlier that day, Marie had confronted Yuki, remarking on her insatiable nature and questioning if Yuki's next target was indeed Miss Yuki herself, a statement that hinted at a deeper, more complex relationship between them. Marie, with a knowing smirk, had welcomed any addition to her harem. Now, in the present, Marie explained to her attendant that she had infiltrated a regular meeting of the Yuki Protection Brigade. She described them as a black mass of madams who were fervent fans of Yuki, meticulously tracking her every move. From these obsessive fans, Marie had gleaned crucial information. Yuki often wandered around at night. She further revealed that the brigade engaged in a ritual, offering Yuki's personal belongings or portraits to an altar, praying for Yuki to turn her head towards them. Her attendant found the revelation unsettling, prompting Marie to wonder aloud where Yuki was truly going. Following Yuki's path, Marie and her attendant arrived outside a lively establishment. Marie's attendant, puzzled, asked about the nature of the place, wondering why Yuki would enter such an establishment. Inside, two men cheered boisterously, their voices echoing with excitement. The two men inside celebrated wildly, one holding a bucket with 3 bottles of sparkling white wine. They exclaimed that they had received something from the princess at table 2, expressing their immense gratitude. Marie, now inside the establishment with her attendant, looked on with a bewildered expression, questioning the meaning of the foolish commotion. Another woman nearby explained that this kind of shop had become quite popular lately. She found herself observing a male host club, a brothel where women spent their money on men in exchange for services. Marie mused that it had become a vicious cycle, a social issue where those who lost all their money ended up selling their own bodies. She struggled to comprehend the situation. As she continued to watch, she overheard patrons discussing how a daughter of a count, like Yuki, should never be found in such a seedy bar, unlike the poor peasant women who might frequent it. Suddenly, a boisterous voice cut through the din, announcing that the princess, at table 10, was receiving special treatment. Marie's eyes widened in surprise, realizing she was the one being referred to. The patrons erupted in cheers, exclaiming that she was on another level and begging her to stay by their side forever. They celebrated the addition of 30 shots of sparkling white wine, shouting their thanks. Amidst the clamor, Yuki, blushing deeply, was showered with adoration, patrons calling her stunning Princess Yuki and lovely Princess Yuki. Marie, witnessing Yuki's transformation and the patrons' fervent praise, could barely believe what she was seeing. Yuki's expression had completely melted into one of pure delight, her eyes sparkling with hearts, utterly captivated by the attention. Marie, still reeling from the shock, wondered what kind of elegant woman Yuki had become to stoop to such a level. Meanwhile, Yuki, beaming, graciously thanked the patrons for their support. Oscar, one of the male hosts, observed Yuki with a subtle, knowing smile, noting that there wasn't even a hint of the usual princess aura coming from her. Yuki, still blushing, expressed her gratitude to Oscar, feeling that she was close to becoming the shop's #1. Oscar, in turn, promised to cheer her on with all his might, as another patron enthusiastically cheered for Princess Yuki. She beamed with joy as another 30 shots of sparkling white wine and a fruit platter were graciously added to her tab, expressing immense gratitude for the lavish gifts. She looked down, her expression a mix of embarrassment and resignation, as Marie stared in utter disbelief. Marie's mind raced, questioning what Yuki was doing in such a place and what this all meant. Under the pale glow of the full moon, a grand, ornate building stood as a silent witness to the unfolding drama. It was within this very structure that the cycle of return by death continued its relentless turn. As the cycles persisted, it became known that Yuki had succumbed to an incomprehensible addiction to a host club. Yet, despite this knowledge, the true reason for her desire to end Marie's life remained a mystery, a recurring enigma from the previous cycles and even before. After a recent ball, Yuki's entire demeanor had abruptly shifted, her eyes now holding an unsettling, vacant glow. This transformation marked a new chapter in their intertwined fates. Marie, observing this unsettling change, knew with certainty that something significant had transpired with Yuki at this very location. She resolved to uncover the truth, determined to avoid being killed again in this cycle. She and Oscar found themselves amidst a gathering of nobles, a place Oscar cynically noted was filled with suckers. Marie declared her intention to witness that something with her own eyes, while Oscar revealed that the owner had pulled strings to grant them entry. Oscar then addressed his companions, identifying them as hosts from that shop. He instructed them to secure wealthy patrons, emphasizing that their lives depended on it. He expressed surprise that they had even managed to attend the ball. Meanwhile, Yuki stood wide-eyed, a bead of sweat tracing her temple, her expression one of profound shock and distress. Oscar, standing on a balcony, spoke to someone unseen, expressing his disbelief at meeting them in such a place. He quickly tried to clarify, stating that the situation was not what it appeared to be. He then turned his gaze to Yuki, a subtle, knowing smile playing on his lips, and delivered a cutting remark. She had disappointed him. Yuki, visibly distraught, cried out that she truly loved him and had spent a fortune on him. Oscar, however, accused her of lying about her affections while simultaneously manhunting at a high-class ball. She vehemently denied his accusation, apologizing profusely and offering to do anything to make amends. Yuki found herself cornered by Oscar, who leaned in close, demanding she sell even more bottles for him. She defiantly retorted, telling him to sell himself instead. He turned away, declaring their association over and warning her never to return to the shop. Yuki, stunned, internally questioned if anyone would ever want to purchase someone like her, even if she tried, before desperately calling out his name, urging him to wait. She collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face, pleading with him to listen, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. She cried out that without that shop, she, still on her knees, head bowed in despair, she acknowledged her situation, lamenting that she could not become a princess, despite believing it to be her sole purpose in life. She wondered how her life had come to such a desolate point. Her thoughts then turned to Marie, whom she blamed for her predicament. She perceived Marie as selfish, always dragging people into her orbit without considering their feelings, simply because she was beautiful. Yuki continued to seethe, believing Marie got away with everything due to her loveliness, while Yuki herself had to pay dearly just to secure companionship. She gazed out a window, her expression hardening as she reflected on Marie, realizing the vast difference between them. A grim understanding settled upon her. Marie stood by a large window, observing Yuki, who remained kneeling. Marie's expression was serious as she stated, "So that's what happened." Marie's eyes narrowed with intense focus. A grandfather clock showed the time was past midnight. She recalled the chilling memory of the last cycle, when Yuki had beheaded her. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Marie walked away with a determined stride, calling out for her maids, Carnier and Lisbella, who promptly responded. She thought to herself that she still had time to change the course of events. She declared that the path was finally clear, and that action should commence immediately as per her orders. Her loyal maids affirmed their unwavering readiness to stand by her side, acknowledging her command. With a resolute expression, she reiterated her command to carry out the plan, urging them to proceed without delay. Meanwhile, as her plan began to unfold, a bustling establishment stood illuminated under the night sky. A voice mused that nobles and commoners were all the same, and that securing every single one of them would be a significant achievement. Elsewhere, Oscar, with a confident smirk, casually remarked that all women were remarkably easy to manipulate. He continued his conversation with his associates, dismissing the women they had fished from the ball, instructing them not to hesitate to discard them once they had served their purpose. One of his companions, however, reported a problem. A crowd had gathered in front of the shop. Oscar, unfazed, suggested they simply make the customers wait outside. However, one of his associates, his eyes wide with alarm, quickly corrected him, stammering that these individuals were not customers, and that they were accompanied by a woman. Indeed, outside the establishment, a large contingent of soldiers had surrounded the shop, their presence ominous under the moonlight. Leading this formidable force was a woman with a stern gaze, who, with a decisive stomp of her foot, issued a direct order to her troops to take them out. Without hesitation, her soldiers moved in, their weapons raised, ready to breach the establishment. Back inside, Oscar and his companions reacted with utter shock and disbelief as the reality of the situation dawned upon them. He and his fellow hosts cried out in terror as the armored soldiers stomped through their club, apprehending them without mercy. One host, pleading for their lives, questioned the soldiers' actions, but their pleas were met with cold indifference. Meanwhile, Marie, observing the unfolding chaos from a distance, calmly discussed the next steps with Yuki. She suggested that while the interior of the establishment could remain largely as it was, the billboard would need to be changed, along with the cast members. As Marie spoke, the soldiers continued their work, dismantling the old sign of the host club. Oscar and the other hosts, now in handcuffs, were led away under guard, their faces etched with despair. A grand carriage, driven by a stern-faced man, rumbled through the streets, its destination unknown. Inside the carriage, Yuki, clearly exasperated, confronted Marie. She expressed her weariness at being constantly led around and demanded to know their current destination. Marie, however, remained composed, simply reassuring Yuki to rest easy. Marie's gaze hardened, her eyes reflecting a fierce resolve as she silently affirmed her intention to save Yuki. Yuki, startled by Marie's declaration, questioned her meaning, asking what she thought she was talking about. The carriage screeched to a halt, interrupting their exchange. The carriage had arrived at its destination, a building adorned with ornate lamps, its facade hinting at a place of entertainment. Marie stepped out, extending a hand to Yuki, urging her to follow. Yuki, however, hesitated, her eyes widening in recognition as she realized the building was the very host club she frequented, though it now appeared different. Yuki stood before the transformed establishment, a massive, brightly lit billboard now adorning its exterior, featuring a glamorous image of a woman. Marie then explained that the shady shop Yuki usually visited had been shut down for fraud. She revealed that they had carried out a major overhaul in a rush, transforming the establishment into something entirely new. Yuki, still processing the information, could only utter a confused "huh," as she glimpsed Oscar and the other hosts imprisoned behind bars in the distance. Yuki, still reeling from the previous events, looked on in disbelief as Marie announced the grand opening of a new shop. Marie explained that what had truly changed was the establishment itself, now operating under her name. Marie, beaming with a wide smile, welcomed a group of eager young women to the newly transformed venue, greeting them with enthusiastic calls of hello and welcome. Yuki, her eyes wide with shock, could only utter a bewildered, as she realized the entire place was now filled with girls. The new patrons immediately swarmed Yuki, their voices overlapping with exclamations of, "How cute!" and "What's with this pretty hair? Can I touch it, please?" Overwhelmed by the sudden attention, Yuki internally questioned what these girls were saying, as they continued to shower her with compliments about her scent, smooth skin, and beauty, calling her a lovely princess. Meanwhile, Marie stood confidently, now clad in a striking, masculine-styled formal suit with a ruffled shirt and white trousers, her posture exuding authority against a backdrop of blooming roses. Marie then approached Yuki and the other girls, who were still captivated by Yuki. Yuki, looking up at Marie's new attire, hesitantly asked what she was wearing. Marie, her eyes gently closed in a serene expression, began to explain her reasoning, stating that she had always thought of Yuki as the most lovely of girls. Leaning in close, her face mere inches from Yuki's, Marie declared her intention to steal her away first before any man could. Yuki's face flushed crimson, her eyes wide with embarrassment and surprise as she stammered, unable to form a coherent response to Marie's bold statement. A glass was offered to her, perhaps to calm her nerves. Yuki, still recovering from the previous events, found solace in a drink, feeling its soothing effect. Marie, observing her from across the room, approached and gently suggested she calm herself and simply enjoy the moment. Yuki, still a bit flustered, offered her thanks. As they settled onto a nearby couch, Marie turned to Yuki, asking if there was something she wished to express. Yuki hesitated, her gaze averted, believing Marie, a perfect princess, would never truly understand someone like her. Marie, however, continued to gaze at Yuki with intense admiration, describing her beautiful eyes, almost transparent fair skin, sparkling hair, and burning red lips. She declared Yuki to be someone who had it all, the epitome of a perfect princess. Overwhelmed by the unexpected praise and the depth of Marie's gaze, Yuki covered her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt a profound sense of injustice, lamenting that the world was so unfair. Marie then confessed her true feelings, admitting she had always been jealous of Yuki since childhood. She explained that Yuki was a special existence, loved by all from birth, completely different from a fake, like herself. Despite this, she revealed, she had always admired Yuki. Yuki could only manage a soft, bewildered sound, her tear-filled eyes wide with shock at Marie's unexpected and raw confession. Marie pressed on, describing Yuki as a wonderful girl who trusted others deeply and gave her love generously. Yuki, still crying, questioned Marie's words, unable to comprehend such a perspective. She believed Marie couldn't possibly think that way, as Yuki herself was merely kind to everyone, regardless of who they were. Marie quickly interjected, dismissing Yuki's self-deprecating thoughts as nonsense. She insisted that Yuki absolutely could not become just someone, explaining that Yuki simply didn't understand. Marie believed her own popularity with men was merely a consequence of her status, not genuine affection. She insisted that Yuki was different, truly loved by the people regardless of their rank, age, or gender. Yuki looked up, startled by the conviction in Marie's voice and the intensity of her gaze. With a sudden, decisive movement, Marie swept Yuki into her arms, holding her close. She declared Yuki a genuine princess, her words ringing with undeniable passion as Yuki remained stunned in her embrace. She felt tears welling in her eyes, her cheeks flushed with an overwhelming mix of emotions as Marie's intense declaration echoed in her mind. She struggled to process the words, realizing that no one had ever spoken to her with such profound admiration before. This was a completely new experience, leaving her speechless. As she struggled with her emotions, Marie gently held her face, a soft smile gracing her lips as she expressed her profound happiness. Marie let out a soft breath, her gaze fixed on Yuki, a subtle, knowing smirk playing on her lips as she uttered her name. Her expression shifted, a triumphant, almost sinister smile spreading across her face as she reveled in the success of her manipulation. The alcohol Marie had given Yuki was no ordinary drink. It was a specially crafted product for nobility, containing poppy seed extract. Even a small sip was potent. Moments later, Marie carried the now unconscious Yuki, explaining to the observing women that the drink was a type of aphrodisiac, capable of melting both body and heart instantly. She noted Yuki's unexpected way. She continued, assuring Yuki that no one would disturb them here. Marie promised her a wonderful love, one that didn't require man, a love reserved solely for her. With Yuki now vulnerable and partially undressed, Marie leaned over her, demanding to see her princessly parts. Yuki, distressed and tearful, weakly protested that she couldn't promise such a thing, but Marie insisted she try her best. Marie leaned in close, her voice a soft whisper, affirming that Yuki was indeed the loveliest princess. Yuki, though still struggling against the drug's hold, internally acknowledged that Marie's actions were for her own self-preservation, yet she found herself unable to resist the powerful sensations. Her face flushed, Yuki's eyes widened further with a mixture of confusion and distress. She questioned her own actions and the bizarre reality unfolding around her, wondering what exactly she was doing. Despite her internal turmoil, the narrative revealed that Marie's Yuri harem had now expanded to include 4 individuals, among them Yuki Yuzuriha, her childhood friend. Yuki, still lost in the drug-induced fantasy, continued to call out for "my prince." A heavy carriage rumbled along a winding road, pulled by 2 powerful horses. The journey was long, carrying its occupants towards an unknown destination, marking the beginning of a new chapter. Later, Marie confronted Emil with a furious expression, demanding she confess what she had been doing with Yuki at a certain shop the previous night. Emil, flustered and blushing, struggled to form a coherent answer. Her aggression was not new. Just the night before, Marie had violently pounded on the door of a VIP room, demanding entry. She held a maid captive, who pleaded for release, explaining that Her Highness was in the midst of completing a mission. Marie, however, was convinced someone was inside and refused to be deterred. The maid cried out in distress as Marie continued to hold her grip unyielding. Marie, recalling the events of the previous night with Yuki, felt no guilt, believing her actions were justified. Now, Marie held a knife to Emil, her expression sharp and intense. She found Emil as annoying as ever, but declared that Emil was the one she truly loved, demanding she stop with the knife. Emil, still flustered, tried to explain that she understood, but Marie pressed her further, asking why she wouldn't simply accept it. Her heart pounded with fear and confusion. Marie's intensity escalated. She declared she would use force to make Emil understand, tearing at her clothes. Emil cried out in protest, begging Her Highness not to act this way in such a place. Moments later, Marie was in a carriage, holding the driver in a similar manner, who also begged for forgiveness, terrified by Her Highness's actions. The carriage sped through the night, leaving the scene of chaos behind. The carriage eventually arrived at a secluded house nestled deep within a forest. Marie stepped out, her expression one of disdain, remarking that both the forest and the hideout were as depressing as ever. She then strode towards the house, her voice echoing as she called out, demanding to know if Rien Monterey was there. She stood before a table, listening as a voice declared that she had found 4 clues in her hand, and from the looks of it, a path to her salvation. Marie simply acknowledged the statement. The mysterious figure, a witch-like woman with a wide, knowing smile, sat behind a crystal ball and an open book. She praised Marie, calling her quite skillful, befitting the princess of debauchery. Marie, however, found the praise unwelcome. She sharply retorted that such compliments would not make her happy in the slightest, and with a sudden, forceful yank, pulled the witch closer, indicating she had a pressing question. Face to face, Marie's frustration was palpable as she demanded to know how much longer she was expected to make women fall for her. She confessed to feeling as though she was going crazy, admitting that her own preferences had grown strange lately, to the point where she no longer recognized herself. The witch merely offered a subtle smirk in response. Marie, desperate for answers, insisted that the witch tell her immediately how much longer this death loop of hers would continue. The witch, however, calmly stated that she did not possess the answer to that question. The witch then explained that Marie remained entangled by countless calamities brought upon women, illustrating her point with an image of Marie ensnared by glowing, restrictive lines. Enraged, Marie lashed out, calling the witch trash and questioning her worth. Yet, the witch, with a chilling smirk, simply reiterated that in order to live, Marie still needed to continue making women fall for her. Meanwhile, Rien Monterey, nude and surrounded by a bed of lilies, greeted Marie with a wide, eager smile, declaring that she had been waiting for Her Highness. Marie found Rienne's excited demeanor quite annoying. As Rienne crawled out of a nearby carriage, Marie decided that she would relieve this irritating feeling, hinting at her next course of action. Moments later, the same maid, now dressed and driving a carriage, seemed to embrace her role, declaring, "I'm your slutty pig, as you said." The carriage rumbled through the town, drawing the attention of onlookers. Meanwhile, the townspeople murmured amongst themselves, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern as the carriage passed, leaving a young man to sigh in exasperation. Back in her chambers, Marie found herself in the same intimate scenario with the maid, a cloud of regret forming above her as she internally acknowledged, "I've gone and done it again." She pondered her situation, realizing the urgency of her predicament. "By the way, I need to do something about this quick. I feel like I'll go past the point of no return at this rate," she thought, her brow furrowed with worry. The maid, now composed and dressed in her uniform, consulted a schedule, noting the crowds gathering outside. According to the schedule, what's with these people crowding around like this? Such a nuisance." She then informed Marie, who was still undressed, that today was the day for an inspection around the city by Her Highness Kirsten and Her Highness Sergia, confirming their presence. As the carriage arrived, the crowd erupted in cheers, shouting the names of the first princess, Kirsten Auvergne Lilian, and the third princess, Sergia Auvergne Lilian, Marie's older and younger half-sisters, respectively. Her regal presence commanded attention. Her Highness Kirsten, with her clear mind and fair judgment, had been handling various political affairs as the representative of His Majesty the King. The commoners, however, reserved their most fervent adoration for Sergia, exclaiming, "How lovely! She's like an angel, and Her Highness Sergia has also grown so splendidly. To think she'd come this far to know the living condition of us peasants. She's akin to a goddess. How beautiful!" She gracefully accepted their praise, a pure and lovely figure who had been the focus of the people's affection since she was young. The maid, observing the scene, mused that both princesses were truly symbols of the monarchy, even as some in the crowd declared, "We came this far from the Boonies to see you. Your Highness Sergia, we love you." Marie reflected on her relationship with her half-sisters, a quiet thought forming in her mind that despite their shared lineage, they were ultimately strangers. As she pondered this, Marie, accompanied by maid Glasses, observed a commotion from a distance. A man with a sinister grin accused a young girl of theft, while another woman watched, seemingly indifferent. The The man's outrage was palpable as he demanded to know how the girl dared to steal his wallet, threatening her with severe consequences. Moments later, the situation escalated. The same man, now joined by an angry crowd, pressed the young girl to the ground, his face contorted in fury. He and the others vehemently demanded her arrest and imprisonment, insisting she pay for her crimes. The crowd continued to shout, demanding she be handed over to the royal guards, refusing to let the matter slide. The young girl, tears streaming down her face, pleaded for mercy, explaining that her little brother was gravely ill and she desperately needed money for his treatment. Her pleas were met with skepticism and accusations of deceit. Just as the situation seemed dire, Princess Sergia stepped forward, her expression filled with profound sadness and compassion. She held out her own fur-lined coat, a valuable garment, her eyes welling with tears. She addressed the distressed girl, stating that while she did not carry money on her person, she had heard everything. Sergia then offered her coat, asking the girl to take it. The young girl, overwhelmed by Sergia's unexpected kindness, began to sob uncontrollably, her face contorted in anguish. She begged Princess Sergia to exchange the coat for money, explaining it was for her brother's medication, and expressed her belief that she could have found another way without resorting to theft. At that moment, Princess Kirsten, Sergia's half-sister, joined them. She calmly declared that the kingdom had a comprehensive care system in place, specifically designed to assist those suffering from serious illnesses. Kirsten then turned to her guards, commanding them to immediately complete the application procedure for the young girl. The commoners, witnessing this display of royal compassion, erupted in exclamations of awe, praising the princesses as goddesses whose actions were truly divine and full of compassion. The crowd's adoration swelled into a thunderous cheer, proclaiming their love for the lovely Princess Sergia and the beautiful Princess Kirsten. They declared that the kingdom truly had a bright future and shouted, "Long live the princesses! Long live to them!" As the public adored the princesses Kirsten and Sergia, Marie found herself in a private moment with her maid, who passionately declared her unwavering loyalty. The maid explained that while the common people loved the other princesses for their perfect and beautiful personalities, Marie, who was often treated like scum by the entire kingdom, was the only one who truly mattered to her. Marie reacted with a surprised gasp at the maid's intense devotion. The maid continued, her words growing more intimate, revealing that she knew Marie's hidden charm points and the nuances of her gentle or rough nature in bed. Marie averted her gaze, seemingly overwhelmed by the maid's candidness, while the maid internally acknowledged that she was too far gone in her affection. Meanwhile, the distinct creak of a carriage wheel could be heard, signaling a departure. The carriage rumbled away, leaving behind a cheering crowd whose adoration, the narrator observed, was based solely on superficial appearances. The people could perceive nothing more than what was presented on the surface. The following day, at the royal palace, within Marie's residence, Yuki arrived. She greeted the unseen occupants with a cheerful "Heya" and offered a polite apology for imposing, her expression bright with anticipation. Inside, Yuki was met by two maids. One of them, Maid A, immediately complimented Yuki, remarking that she looked hella cute today and had the face of a maiden in love. Yuki, beaming, confirmed the sentiment with a confident "of course." The maids invited Yuki in, informing her that Marie was in the back room. Yuki's excitement was palpable as she declared that today was the day she would stay with Marie until morning, eagerly asking for her location. She then burst forward, calling out Marie's name with an energetic "bam." Yuki quickly located Marie, who was resting on a couch. She exclaimed that she had been looking for her and greeted her once more. She gently approached Marie, placing a hand on her shoulder, and apologized for keeping her waiting, affectionately addressing her as "my dear prince." Marie remained still, her face obscured from view. Yuki leaned closer, questioning if Marie was truly asleep. She then expressed how deeply she had missed her, revealing that she had completed her mission twice as fast just to be reunited. She eagerly anticipated spending the night together, as a soft thud indicated Marie's head settling further into the cushion. Yuki looked down at Marie, who was indeed fast asleep on the couch, a teapot and cup resting on the table beside her. Yuki's expression shifted to one of surprise and disappointment, her plans for the evening now uncertain. Her eyes, once filled with anticipation, now stretched wide with a profound horror, reflecting a sudden, shocking discovery. She stood frozen, her voice barely a whisper of disbelief, as Marie lay slumped on the sofa, blood staining her lips and the pristine tea set on the table. The realization struck her with brutal force. The tea set, the spilled liquid, Marie's lifeless form. It simply could not be. Marie, the elegant princess, was undeniably gone, a trickle of blood a stark contrast against her pale skin, confirming the grim truth. Princess Sergia basked in the fervent adoration of her subjects, who clamored for her attention, showering her with praise and declarations of love. She acknowledged their cheers with a graceful hand gesture, a picture of regal charm. She then addressed her adoring public, offering a sweet smile and a polite thank you, maintaining the facade of a benevolent ruler. However, once inside the opulent royal palace Sergia residence, her demeanor shifted dramatically. She slumped onto a grand chair, a look of utter boredom and disdain replacing her earlier warmth. The thought of a city inspection was met with a dismissive sigh, deemed utterly lame. She scowled, her thoughts turning venomous as she considered the common folk, finding them repulsive and lamenting how they had soured her mood. Still fuming, she demanded her shoes be removed, complaining that her duties were tiresome and questioning why they were even her problem. Her personal maid, Bridget, stood ready to serve, acknowledging Her Highness's command with a calm, professional demeanor. Bridget knelt before her mistress, who impatiently urged her to hurry and remove the shoes. Serisa grumbled about being tired from walking around just to provide fan service to simpletons. As she removed the shoe, Serisa's foot pressed against Bridget's face, a clear display of the princess's disdain. Serisa continued her tirade, claiming she was prone to sickness when men were near and accusing Bridget of being useless for allowing them within a meter of her. Bridget, however, quietly pointed out that it was Serisa herself who had approached them. She then accused Bridget of fault, demanding to know if she was blaming her. Bridget offered a quiet apology, though her internal thoughts revealed a defiant refusal to forgive Serisa's unreasonable behavior. She continued her imperious demands, ordering Bridget to move and declaring that this called for the usual punishment. Bridget, kneeling, acknowledged her mistress's command with a quiet, resigned understanding. Now bent over, she humbly asked if this posture pleased her princess. Serisa, observing her, mused that a servant ought to be able to predict her master's actions, before delivering a sharp kick and dismissing Bridget as utterly inept. The princess continued her assault, repeatedly kicking Bridget and condemning her as damn inept with each blow, as the maid cried out in pain. Bridget lay on the ground, tears streaming down her face, her body racked with sobs as she offered a pained apology. Yet, Serisa remained unmoved, her verbal abuse continuing as she branded Bridget a scumbag and the lowest, demanding more tears if her apology was truly sincere. The princess then resumed her physical punishment, kicking Bridget once more, who internally acknowledged that this humiliation and abuse had become a daily ritual. Despite the pain, Bridget's face contorted into a strange, almost ecstatic smile, tears and drool mixing as she internally declared that Princess Serisa was in top form, and that this euphoria of being abused by a small girl with such little strength was truly delightful. Serisa then grabbed her. Serisa, disgusted by Bridget's expression, questioned why she appeared so happy, calling her gross. Bridget, however, reveled in the moment, internally proclaiming Serisa the best, even as the princess defiantly tried to inflict pain. Serisa then threatened to fire her if she did not cease, but Bridget, still in her state of perverse pleasure, merely cried out. Serisa, her face contorted in a furious grimace, declared that this was a pleasure endurance play, and that she must endure it, for if she did not, Princess Serisa's bullying would cease to be. Bridget, despite the pain, realized the princess's anger stemmed from rumors heard during the city inspection. She internally cursed the shitty commoners for their gossip, knowing it had gotten under Serisa's skin. Serisa's tirade continued, her voice filled with disbelief at the notion that she had mellowed out or stopped killing people she disliked. Bridget, still pinned, acknowledged the princess's fury, even as Serisa raged about being called a beautiful, well-mannered princess who had just stopped fighting for men. She then lamented that her own popularity had plummeted, while that of that dirtbag Marie had inexplicably increased. Serisa, asserting her superiority, declared Marie an unfucking real existence in herself far superior to both Marie and Kirsten. With a final, forceful squeeze, Serisa proclaimed herself the prettiest girl in the entire universe, her voice echoing with self-aggrandizement. The princess, still consumed by her own self-importance, remained utterly high on herself. Bridget, meanwhile, internally acknowledged Serisa as the worst brat, but also fit to be my master, knowing she had to maintain her composure lest Serisa discover her true feelings and fire her. Suddenly, the mood shifted as news arrived. Miss Yuki, described as a gallant, wise, beautiful, and graceful personage, was visiting Princess Marie's residence. Bridget's eyes widened in ecstatic surprise, her heart pounding with the prospect of meeting her idol. The focus then shifted to the Grand Royal Palace Marie residence, where the anticipated meeting was to take place. As they walked, Serisa, now in a cheerful mood, hummed happily about meeting Miss Yuki, her previous rage seemingly forgotten in the excitement. She fantasized about the joy of Miss Yuki being her sister, rather than those dreadful people. Bridget, her maid, quietly affirmed that such a feeling would indeed be wonderful. Still consumed by her thoughts, she angrily questioned who dared to speak so casually about Miss Yuki Yuzuriha, a truly wonderful person whose refined sensibility was rarely found among the nobility. Bridget remained a silent observer. Marie's thoughts continued, expressing a deep concern that leaving Yuki alone with someone like herself would be too pitiful. She felt that accompanying Yuki was the absolute least she could do for her. Back at Princess Marie's residence, Serisa burst through the doors with an enthusiastic greeting, loudly wishing Miss Yuki well. Bridget followed closely behind her. Her eyes widened dramatically, reflecting a sudden, profound shock at the scene before her. The cause of Serisa's astonishment became clear. Miss Yuki and Princess Marie sat intimately at a table laden with sweets, holding hands and gazing affectionately at each other, surrounded by an aura of hearts. Serisa watched the tender interaction, her expression a mix of disbelief and heartbreak as she softly uttered Yuki's name. Bridget stood nearby, observing the unfolding drama. Marie, with a gentle smile, noticed a trace of cream near Yuki's lips. She delicately wiped it away with her finger, then licked the cream from her own digit. Yuki, blushing deeply from the intimate gesture, softly thanked Marie. Serisa's eyes widened in utter disbelief, her mouth agape, as Bridget watched her princess's profound shock unfold. Still reeling from the sight, Serisa stammered, unable to articulate her purpose, while Marie, composed, inquired if she had business there. Yuki, seated beside Marie, offered a casual greeting to little Cerisa. Marie then explained that she had important matters requiring her attention, implying she could not play, and looked to Yuki for confirmation. Cerisa's face contorted in a silent scream of frustration and disbelief, her mind rejecting the casual dismissal, while Yuki calmly sipped her tea, seemingly unbothered. Yuki let out a languid yawn, prompting Marie to remark that Yuki hadn't been getting enough sleep lately. Marie then playfully blamed Yuki for her own lack of rest, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as she touched her nose. Cerisa's eyes bulged, her face a mask of mortification and outrage, as she internally protested their brazen display, questioning how Yuki could be so greedy. Her fury reaching a boiling point, Cerisa clenched her fists, her teeth gritted, as she silently cursed Marie, vowing that she would not let this transgression pass, especially after Cerisa had set her sights on Yuki first. Bridget remained a silent observer to the princess's rage. The following day, Cerisa stood before Marie's grand residence, her expression hardened with resolve. She declared her intent to make Marie Auvergne Lilian regret her actions. Yet, despite her earlier vow, Cerisa's demeanor shifted dramatically, her face beaming with an innocent, almost childlike joy as she announced her arrival to play again. She sat, looking displeased, and questioned Yuki's presence, wondering aloud what had brought her there, suggesting Yuki only appeared when Marie was present. Despite Cerisa's annoyance, Yuki, with an exaggerated, cheerful smile, declared her profound love for her dear sister. Cerisa, clearly irritated, told her to cease the cringy act, but Yuki merely snapped her fingers playfully. As their playful exchange continued, Bridget arrived, pushing a rattling tea cart. Cerisa watched her, still with a hint of irritation, as Bridget announced she had acquired special tea leaves from a foreign country and hoped they could all enjoy tea time together. Soon, the tea was served. Yuki happily sipped her cup, exclaiming how delectable it was. Cerisa, too, took a cup, appearing thoughtful as Bridget elaborated that these were high-class tea leaves, specially ordered from a foreign country in the East. As Cerisa tasted the exotic brew, she noted its distinct fragrance. However, a moment later, her eyes widened, a sudden realization or alarm dawning upon her. Yuki remained oblivious to Cerisa's sudden change, maintaining an innocent smile. Cerisa, meanwhile, looked away, her expression unreadable as steam continued to rise from her teacup. Her composure broken, Cerisa's teacup clattered loudly. Yuki, finally noticing the disturbance, turned to her with concern, asking, "Dear sister, what's the matter?" Overwhelmed by an unseen force, Cerisa was visibly distressed. Clutching her mouth as sounds of discomfort and nausea escaped her. Bridget watched her with a subtle, knowing smile, a silent understanding passing between them. Cerisa, sweating and wide-eyed, struggled to speak, managing to utter Bridget's name before gasping her own. Finally succumbing to her distress, Cerisa lay sprawled across the table, clearly unwell. Yuki stood by, observing her, while Bridget knelt, attending to the ailing princess, who weakly called out for Marie. She endured a torrent of cruel words, being branded a damned bitch and a disgrace upon this family. A foot stomped nearby, emphasizing the verbal assault. The torment continued, as she heard a voice declare that another was more suitable to be by Miss Yuki's side, her face contorted in distress. Bridget then stood over her, as she lay helpless on the floor, seemingly poisoned. Bridget, with a chilling smile, wished her to go to hell in peace, and mocked her pained expression, finding it fit for a fool. The cruel words persisted, as her tormentor, likely Bridget, continued to smile with malicious glee, calling her such an idiot. Her eye, wide with terror and pain, reflected the depth of her suffering. Suddenly, she awoke, sitting upright in a grand bed, her gaze sweeping across an unfamiliar room. As she looked around, she realized she was not alone. An unknown dark-haired woman lay beside her, seemingly asleep, adding to her confusion. Her disorientation deepened as she recognized the surroundings as the VIP room, a place she associated with a past triumph over Yuki. Despite waking, the lingering pain and confusion were evident on her face. Without warning, a violent wave of nausea overcame her, and she began to vomit profusely, a stream of liquid spewing from her mouth. She continued to retch, collapsing forward as the intense pain racked her body. She muttered about the severe agony, feeling as though she had been murdered by poison. Still reeling from the poison, she continued to retch violently, her body convulsing with each heave. The unknown woman beside her, however, showed no sympathy, instead remarking that this prolonged agony was far worse than a swift beheading. As Cerisa lay helpless on the floor, the woman stood over her, her voice laced with accusation. She declared that Cerisa had committed unspeakable atrocities against her own elder sister, asserting that the princess had finally sealed her own fate. The woman's words seemed to trigger a vivid, tormenting memory or hallucination within Cerisa's mind. Bridget appeared, a sinister smile playing on her lips, vowing to make the cheeky brat pay for her actions and expressing outrage at being entrapped. A fierce resolve hardened Cerisa's features. Her eyes narrowed, teeth clenched, and a drop of saliva escaped her lips, reflecting a profound, simmering rage. It was a fury that suggested even adults could be consumed by a primal fear. Yet, Sergia Auvergne Lilian, the younger sister, maintained a sweet facade, even as her inner thoughts betrayed a calculating mind. She had once dismissed Marie as a pitiful brat, desperate for validation, but now recognized a newfound defiance in her. The crowd, oblivious to Sergia's true nature, cheered her on. Suddenly, Sergia pulled away, her demeanor turning cold and commanding as she ordered Marie to quickly dress. Marie, disoriented and still yearning for the intimacy, questioned Sergia's abrupt change, asking why she had become so distant and reminding her they were not yet finished. Sergia, however, remained unyielding, urging her to simply hurry. A distinct clanging sound echoed from outside, drawing Sergia's attention to the moonlit window. Her eyes narrowed, a sudden realization dawning upon her. Someone was approaching. Moments later, the source of the noise became clear as a woman, clad in a maid's uniform and spectacles, walked down the dimly lit hallway, her lantern casting long shadows. The clanging sounds continued with her measured steps. She cautiously approached a door, which creaked open under her touch. Peeking inside, Emil's eyes widened in shock as she discovered Sergia and Marie, the latter still partially undressed. She gasped, recognizing the two princesses. Marie, overwhelmed by the sudden intrusion and her compromising state, cried out Emil's name in distress. Emil, equally stunned, could only stammer Marie. "And your highness," her eye twitching in disbelief at the sight before her. Sergia, however, observed the scene with a subtle, almost satisfied expression. Later, Sergia, now fully dressed and composed, held Emil's face tenderly. With a soft, loving gaze, she declared that Emil was the only one she truly loved. Emil, flustered and taken aback by the unexpected confession, looked up at Sergia with wide, surprised eyes. The following day, marked ominously as the second time Marie would be poisoned, Sergia sat alone on a plush couch, a crown resting upon her head. Her expression was stern and contemplative, hinting at the machinations already in motion. She reflected on the previous encounter, realizing that in Sergia's crazed-by-jealousy state, she had managed to avoid Emil's trap of being stabbed, at least for now. A soft kerchuk sound then indicated a door opening. Moments later, Sergia burst into the room, her face alight with joy, exclaiming that she had come to play again. As Sergia settled onto a nearby couch with a smug expression, Marie, still in bed, regarded her with a look of annoyance, internally labeling her as the main trouble. With a decisive snap of her fingers, Marie signaled for something. In response to Marie's signal, Bridget entered the room, pushing a tea cart that rattled softly, a pleasant smile gracing her lips. Sergia then began to explain that she had obtained some high-class tea leaves from a foreign country in the East, expressing her hope to enjoy tea time with Marie that day. Marie, however, harbored a different thought, a silent unfortunately echoing in her mind. With a serene smile, Marie internally confessed her distinct lack of fondness for poison-laced tea. Sergia, taken aback by Marie's unexpected demeanor, questioned her sister's actions. Bridget, however, maintained her calm, smiling expression, directly telling Sergia to cease her pointless act, as she was fully aware of Sergia's intentions. Sergia's face contorted in shock as Marie, her gaze piercing, declared that she could see right through her. Marie then reflected on the numerous ways she had died in previous lives. Now standing, clad in a different attire and holding a sword, Marie considered the situation. She realized she could simply refuse the tea offered by a powerless kid like Sergia. She mused that while past deaths, whether by guillotine or Yuki's sword, had presented unavoidable patterns, things were different now. She was confident she could proceed without dying this time. With a confident smirk spreading across her face, Marie internally assessed the situation as a cakewalk. She then addressed Sergia directly, calling her dear sister. She, with a confident smile, placed a hand over her heart and challenged Sergia, asking just who she thought she was. Sergia then proudly declared herself to be Sergia Auvergne Lilian, the idol of the kingdom, loved by all, whose every word held sway. Marie stood before her, listening intently. Marie, looking unimpressed, retorted that Sergia was on too high a horse for being just a bit popular, suggesting her head was too high up. Sergia, still smiling, asserted that her existence was one where everyone in the whole kingdom obeyed her. Marie's expression hardened, her eyes widening with anger as she questioned why she should kneel before the likes of Sergia. She then commanded Sergia Auvergne Lilian to kneel. The command took immediate effect. Sergia was suddenly forced to her knees, her face contorted in terror, eyes wide with shock and fear as she stared at the ground. Moments later, Sergia awakened in her bed, disoriented and gasping, wondering what was happening. The terrifying image of Marie's command flashed in her mind, followed by Marie's voice calmly stating, "Now then." She looked up to see Marie standing over her, holding a teacup with a sweet, innocent smile, addressing her as dear sister and instructing her to drink your tea. Sergia's body tensed, a pained expression on her face as the teacup clattered. Sergia's eyes widened in horror as she realized her body was moving on its own, compelled to pick up the cup. She questioned the meaning of this, wondering if Marie was behind it. Her mind raced, a chilling realization dawning upon her. Marie must possess the power to make people obey her simply by using her words. Sergia, now fully dressed and clutching her head, was overwhelmed by the horrifying truth. She denied it, unable to accept that such a power existed, especially from Marie. She vowed to escape this fate next time, but the thought was quickly dismissed as impossible. A grand castle stood in the distance, a silent witness to her despair. Still reeling from the previous encounter, she found herself in a familiar scenario. It was the same day, marked as the third time Marie was to be poisoned. Marie, seated regally, observed her. With a forced smile, Sergia approached, offering tea and inviting her sister to play. As they walked through a doorway, Sergia concealed a small, sharp knife behind her back, hidden from Marie's view. Her eyes narrowed with fierce resolve. She decided to abandon all pretense and simply kill Marie, believing it to be a legitimate act of self-defense, as Marie was the one coming for her first. With a sudden lunge, she raised the knife, but Marie, with astonishing speed and composure, effortlessly blocked the attack, gripping Sergia's wrist with her bare hand. Sergia's face contorted in a mix of pain and utter shock. Marie, still holding Sergia's wrist firmly, calmly inquired about her intentions, while Sergia remained frozen, the knife still poised in the air. Marie continued to mock her, stating that she knew Sergia was foolish to begin with, and now she had gone insane, attempting to kill her. She then offered Sergia a drink. Marie's face drew close, her eyes burning with an intense, compelling power. Sergia's mind screamed in defiance, asserting that there was no way she would comply, but Marie's voice cut through her resistance, insisting, "You can do it." Marie's command echoed, urging her to come and have a drink, as a steaming cup of tea was presented. The narrative then shifted to a later point, the same day, now marked as the fourth time Marie was to be poisoned. Sergia, once again, found herself in a similar predicament, reflecting that she would have to resolve this situation as she usually did, perhaps by seducing her way out. Her internal monologue continued, lamenting that her time was limited and her affection level towards Marie had plummeted to a despairingly low point, as graphically illustrated by a declining chart. She silently addressed Marie as her dear sister. Her eyes widened in shock as Marie, with a cheerful demeanor, announced that it was time for tea and that she had come to play once more. Bridget stood silently by Marie's side. Instead of accepting the invitation, she raised a musket, her face contorted in a furious snarl, and screamed for Marie to die. The musket fired with a loud report, but Marie remained completely unharmed, her expression unperturbed. Moments later, the weapon itself inexplicably detached from her grasp, clattering to the floor. She gasped in disbelief, her face a mask of rage and frustration, as Marie's serene gaze met hers, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. Marie then commanded her to kneel. Despite her internal protests that such power akin to sorcery could not exist, her body betrayed her, obeying Marie's order once again. She collapsed to her knees, utterly defeated, muttering the names Carnier and Lisbel in despair. As Sergia knelt, two maids, seemingly under Marie's influence, descended from above, declaring their obedience to her order. Sergia looked up, startled, as one of the maids landed with a decisive stomp, blocking her path. The two maids stood firm, one with long blonde hair and the other with braided brown hair, as the blonde maid calmly instructed both of them not to move. The blonde maid then explained that harming a princess was a major crime, even if it was an order from Lady Sergia herself. She advised Sergia to be a good girl and accept her fate of being tied up, her words carrying an unsettling undertone. As Sergia remained kneeling, Bridget, Marie's personal maid, stepped forward, her expression stern, standing over the blonde maid. Bridget looked down at the blonde maid, whom she identified as Sergia's personal maid, and internally mused about the dumb revelation of this woman's bizarre power. Bridget, holding Sergia down, explained that she was forced to obey Sergia using brute strength, and that was the extent of it. Below them, other maids, also under Marie's influence, stood ready with various weapons, their expressions mirroring Sergia's shock. Sergia, still held captive, looked away with a distressed expression, a musket lying discarded nearby. She pondered the implications. If Marie alone could protect her from all assaults, then her thoughts were interrupted as she found herself on the ground, looking up in disbelief. Marie and Yuki stood over her, Marie's foot raised, poised to strike. A sharp smack echoed as Marie's foot connected. Marie stood calmly amidst the chaos, her expression serene, as two of Sergia's maids lay unconscious on the checkered floor around her, clouds of dust still dissipating from their sudden collapse. She then turned her attention back to Sergia, who remained on the floor, utterly subdued. Yuki watched silently from the side, observing the unfolding display of power. Yuki, with a sweet smile, addressed Sergia, reminding her that a servant's strength reflected her master's, implying Marie's immense power. Sergia, still reeling, could only wonder how this was possible. Marie's foot hovered over Sergia's face. Marie's foot descended, pressing firmly against Sergia's cheek, a clear act of physical humiliation. Sergia's eye widened in a mixture of pain and shock. With her foot still on Sergia's face, Marie leaned down, her voice laced with a chilling promise of future punishment for her slow servant. She pointed out that they now had eyewitnesses to Sergia's humiliation. Sergia, tears welling in her eyes and panting heavily, her face contorted in a mix of distress and what appeared to be forced pleasure, uttered a strained, "Thank you very much, Your Highness Sergia." As Marie's foot remained pressed against her, still on the floor, Sergia's mind raced, trying to comprehend the bizarre relationship between Marie and her servants. Marie, meanwhile, watched Sergia with a subtle, satisfied smile, her tongue tracing her lips. Marie, observing Sergia and Bridget, calmly declared that she had completely hit a dead end. Sergia, looking distressed, held a teacup. However, the scene abruptly shifted to Sergia, who, with a wide, almost forced smile, offered food to an unseen individual. "Here you go, dear sister," she chirped, urging them to say Aya. Sergia, her eyes narrowed in disdain, declared the other women to be trashy sluts, good for nothing but their carnal desires. She then slammed her hand down, demanding more alcohol, claiming there wasn't enough. Just then, Emil burst into the room, her face etched with concern, and sternly advised Sergia to keep both her alcohol intake and her sensual entertainment in check. Sergia, ignoring the maid's words, took a defiant swig directly from the bottle. She scoffed, accusing Emil of being jealous because she wasn't included, a claim Emil vehemently denied. Emil, deeply worried, attempted to wrestle the bottle from Sergia's grasp, expressing her concern that Sergia had been drowning herself in women and alcohol lately. As the confrontation escalated, the other women, Marie and Yuki, quickly fled the bed. She dismissed her own troubles, telling Emil it was nothing, really. Even as Emil, blushing with concern, questioned what could have possibly happened to the princess. Emil internally acknowledged her own massive problem, yet felt she still had to deal with it. Sergia continued, asserting that Emil's consultation would not help her in the slightest, regardless of how many times she had died and returned. Meanwhile, an unknown woman lay in bed, seemingly in distress. Elsewhere, Bridget, observing the situation, mused that there was nothing she could do this time either, convinced that Sergia's servant was unreasonably strong. She declared she had no time to deal with that brat. Sergia, her expression pained, reflected on her fleeting life, accepting that it was her fate to be killed once again and forced to drink poison-laced tea. She then turned her attention to Emil, provocatively reminding her that Emil had once called her scum. Sergia defiantly stated her intention to drown herself in pleasure and die as the scum she was, asking Emil if she didn't agree that such a fate fit her to a T. Emil looked on, visibly shocked. In a sudden burst of emotion, Emil grabbed Sergia's arm, causing Sergia to cry out in surprise and pain. Emil demanded to know what Sergia thought she was doing, even if her words held some truth. Emil's fury erupted as she unleashed a torrent of insults, branding Sergia a scum among all scums, vulgar, debauched, and vile, a princess in name only, and someone with zero popularity among the masses. She concluded her tirade by unequivocally declaring Sergia a scumbag. Marie intervened, gently taking Emil's hands and speaking her name softly. Marie reassured Emil, promising that she would always be by her side, and that no one in the entire world would ever be able to separate them. Emil, her anger melting away, blushed deeply and smiled dreamily, her thoughts drifting to the intimacy of being in the bed with Marie. Sergia, witnessing this tender exchange, looked on with a confused and slightly annoyed expression, questioning Marie's words and reminding her that they made a promise. She remained confused by Marie's words, wondering what her sister meant by a promise that would lead them both to even higher peaks of carnal heights. Sergia could not recall ever making such a pledge. Meanwhile, Bridget observed from a distance, a sinister expression settling upon her face as she contemplated the unfolding events. Elsewhere, Emil considered a suggestion, finding it to be a rather good idea. She was then told that it was her time to shine, implying a significant role in the upcoming plans. Returning to Sergia, she declared with utmost urgency that there was something critical she needed investigated. The grand castle stood majestically under the sky, while Sergia's joyful singing echoed through its halls, a melody of pure delight. She continued to sing gleefully, proclaiming this was the day she would finally say goodbye to the irksome Marie, as Bridget pushed a cart silently behind her. Bridget also received instructions regarding Miss Yuki, who, with an excited expression, anticipated something that would soon fall into her hands, to be handled personally. Bridget confirmed her understanding, receiving the chilling command to ensure that the loathsome Marie would draw her last breath. Later, Sergia, still cheerful, approached someone, suggesting they play again and have some tea together, but was met with a firm refusal. She sat upon her ornate chair, a crown resting lightly on her head, and issued a stern command for someone to return to their abode at once. As Marie entered the lavish room, Sergia, turning slightly to face her, scoffed at her presence, remarking on the rather bold attitude she displayed. She continued her verbal assault, dismissing Marie as a pure and simple brat, and ordering her to go home, adding that Marie's head was held far too high. Bridget remained impassive as Sergia, now using Marie's full name, Marie Auvergne Lilian, issued a chilling command for her to kneel. The princess then turned her gaze away, a stern and unyielding expression fixed upon her features, clearly expecting immediate obedience. Marie, caught off guard, widened her eyes in surprise and apprehension, while Sergia's finger pointed sharply, emphasizing her unwavering command. Bridget's expression grew colder, her eyes fixed on Marie, as Sergia once more commanded Marie Auvergne Lilian to kneel without delay. Marie flinched, a soft tisk escaping her, as Bridget, maintaining her stern demeanor, sharply questioned her delay, calling her a wooden dummy and urging her to hurry. Marie, however, internally refused, thinking no way. Marie's face contorted in a mixture of shock and disbelief, her eyes wide with alarm as she called out Bridget's name, demanding to know what was truly happening. Sergia, first displaying a subtle, almost satisfied smile, then settling into a calm, serious expression, gazed out into the night, where a full moon shone brightly in the sky. The night before, in Marie's room, a tense meeting unfolded. Bridget stood before Marie, who was seated, while Emil observed from the side. This was Chapter 8. You can come to a more wondrous world. Bridget, addressing Marie, questioned if she had requested her presence, then asserted that there was no need to feign ignorance. She revealed her knowledge that Sergia was manipulating Marie. Marie, recalling a past encounter, remembered Sergia's piercing gaze as she asked if Marie intended to take her life. Sergia's thoughts echoed, believing Marie had no other recourse but to depend on her if she truly wished to kill her. Meanwhile, Bridget, observing the scene, internally dismissed Sergia's assessment, finding it inconceivable that the princess would underestimate Marie, whom she considered a powerless little girl. Returning to the present conversation, Bridget urged Marie to disregard Sergia's commands, emphasizing that nothing dire would occur. Marie, however, firmly stated that she had pledged her loyalty to Princess Sergia and no one else. Bridget mused on Marie's declaration of loyalty, suggesting it was merely a facade. Marie, with unwavering resolve, countered that she could not simply pretend not to hear Sergia's orders as long as the princess commanded her. Leaning in closer, Bridget's voice dropped, asking Marie if Sergia inflicted pain upon her purely for the sake of pleasure. Marie averted her gaze, feigning ignorance and claiming she had no idea what Bridget was implying. Bridget, with a knowing look, then called out Emil's name. As Bridget spoke, she presented Marie with a stack of documents, revealing them to be investigation reports that she had personally commissioned the royal spies to gather. Marie's eye widened dramatically, her pupils shrinking in profound shock as she absorbed the contents of the reports. The investigation reports Bridget presented were a shocking collection of explicit images and documents, detailing various illicit activities and compromising situations. She stared at the damning evidence, her face contorted in utter shock and disbelief. Meanwhile, Emil, observing the scene, questioned Bridget's actions, stating that she had crossed a line and could be charged with treason for a common maid. She admitted she didn't quite comprehend Bridget's intentions. Marie, still reeling from the revelations, cried out in confusion, demanding to know what all of this was about, claiming she had zero idea. Bridget, however, simply smiled, remarking that both Marie and Sergia were still like children, and that Sergia had quite a fancy hobby. She continued, asserting that if Marie would leave it to her, she would reveal the hidden charm behind it all, implying Marie didn't understand its true nature. Bridget's expression turned more intense as she promised to guide Marie to an even higher peak of carnal heights, something she had never tasted before. Marie, taken aback by the shocking proposition, questioned what she meant by carnal heights and even higher, while Bridget calmly stated that their relationship had already reached its zenith of love a long time ago. With a determined look, Bridget then began to push a large, covered cart, its wheels rattling loudly as she moved it across the tiled floor. The sudden appearance of the cart drew gasps of surprise from Marie, Emil, and the blonde maid, their eyes wide with curiosity and apprehension as the wheels screeched to a halt. Marie, who had been left in shock by Bridget's revelations, now found herself subjected to the maid's peculiar guidance. Her wrists were tightly bound with intricate ropes, and a leather ball gag, dripping with moisture, was secured in her mouth. Bound and gagged, she lay on her side, her body exposed, as the ropes constricted her arms behind her back, forcing her into a vulnerable position. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and burgeoning sensation, welled with tears, reflecting the intense experience she was undergoing. The sensations overwhelmed her, causing her head to tilt back and her mouth to stretch open in a silent scream of pleasure or agony, her eyes rolling back. She remained on the bed, her body still bound, as Bridget stood nearby, observing her with a calm, almost clinical gaze. Marie's mind raced, grappling with the conflicting emotions. She thought that if this made Marie happy, then she couldn't believe it. Yet, a part of her found the situation embarrassing, urging herself not to look. Bridget, meanwhile, reflected on the transformation, noting how the personage Her Highness Sergia adored in secret, overflowing with dignity and intelligence akin to an ideal male figure, Miss Yuki, had been reduced to this form of a slutty bitch. She mused that for both of them, it was but a simple matter. Yuki, with a knowing, almost seductive smile, seemed to whisper of a more wondrous world that Marie could come to, her words echoing Bridget's earlier promises. Marie, still bound on the bed, swallowed hard, her thoughts consumed by the idea of this more wondrous world, and the implication that it involved Her Highness Sergia, all orchestrated by Bridget. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Sergia, her eyes wide with shock and anger, confronted Bridget, demanding to know what she was doing. She, Princess Sergia, confronted Bridget, who held Marie captive. Sergia, her face contorted in anger, demanded to know why Bridget wouldn't speak, calling her a useless scum and ordering her to tie Marie up. Bridget, however, remained defiant, questioning why Sergia refused to listen to her orders. Sergia, asserting her authority, reminded Bridget that she was her mistress. Despite Sergia's assertion, Bridget merely offered a subtle smirk. Sergia, taken aback, could only utter a confused why, as Bridget, with a confident tap of her fingers, declared, "Now then." Following Bridget's cryptic remark, Sergia's demeanor shifted entirely. She leaned in close to Marie, a sinister smirk now gracing her lips, and announced that it was time for Marie's punishment. Marie, still bound, blushed deeply, her eyes wide with apprehension. In the Marie residence basement, Princess Sergia, bound and furious, screamed at her captors, demanding if they understood the severe consequences of their actions against her. Still restrained, Sergia desperately called out for Bridget to save her, but Bridget remained impassive. Yuki, observing the scene with a smirk, dismissed Sergia as nothing more than a noisy brat. Bridget, her expression stern and unwavering, then issued a chilling command, ordering Sergia to strip herself completely bare at once. Sergia, her face flushing with a mix of embarrassment and disbelief, stammered, questioning the maid's words. However, Bridget's gaze offered no room for negotiation, and Yuki's presence loomed, ensuring compliance. Yuki, with a cruel glint in her eyes, reiterated the command for Bridget to strip, emphasizing the order. Sergia, still defiant despite her predicament, vehemently protested, asserting that Bridget was her maid and would never obey such a vulgar instruction. To Sergia's utter shock and disbelief, Bridget began to comply, her maid uniform sliding down to reveal her undergarments, a stark betrayal of Sergia's expectations. Moments later, Bridget stood completely nude, her arms crossed defensively over her chest, her face a mask of profound embarrassment. Still blushing deeply, Bridget looked down and quietly asked if her exposed state was enough to please them. Yuki, observing the scene with a mocking smile, taunted Sergia, remarking on Bridget's willingness to betray her own master and expose herself. Sergia let out a pained cry of anguish. Yuki, her smile widening with malicious pleasure, further insulted Bridget, labeling her a vulgar swine. As the maid stood exposed, her hands now bound behind her back. Sergia, overwhelmed by horror and despair, screamed Bridget's name in a desperate plea. Yuki, however, remained unperturbed, dismissing Sergia's distress by stating it was no surprise, given Bridget's inherent nature. She then brought the whip down upon Bridget's bare back, the sharp sound echoing. Meanwhile, Sergia, witnessing the brutal act, cried out in disbelief, demanding to know what Yuki was doing. Yuki merely smiled, thinking that being whipped by someone like her would not make Bridget feel good. As Sergia watched in horror, Bridget's expression twisted into one of perverse ecstasy, declaring that this felt so much better than with Princess Sergia. She pleaded for more, addressing someone named Your Highness Marie, revealing her true colors. Yuki, observing this, granted her wish. Fulfilling Bridget's plea, she continued to lash her with the whip, promising to train her thoroughly. Bridget cried out in pleasure, while Sergia, bound and helpless, screamed in disgust, calling Yuki a slutty swine and a sow. Yuki then turned her attention to Sergia, taunting her by asking how it felt to have her cute little servant stolen before her eyes, and if the thought of having someone she loved taken from her would turn her on. Sergia, aghast, denied it vehemently, calling Yuki delusional. Bridget, meanwhile, continued to moan in pleasure, confirming Yuki's assertion that Sergia was also quite the pervert. Despite her protests, she felt an unsettling sensation stirring deep within her, causing her to gasp and clench her fists in confusion, wondering what was happening. Yuki, observing her internal turmoil, began to explain that in this world, there are those who find pleasure in oppressing others, and those who find pleasure in being oppressed. She asserted that Sergia had been pretending to be on the oppressing side all this time. Leaning in close, she declared that Sergia possessed the qualities to be on the oppressed side, calling her a true and genuine pervert. She, her face flushed, vehemently denied Yuki's accusation, calling her delusional and asking if she was stupid. Yuki simply smiled, inviting Sergia to enlighten her if she believed her to be wrong. She remained flustered by Yuki's probing questions, who challenged her facade, asking why she bothered to please citizens she disliked. Yuki asserted that Sergia's self-esteem was derived solely from the praises of others, a clear sign of her true nature. Despite her protests, Yuki leaned in, her expression unwavering, declaring Sergia's actions as irrefutable proof that she desired to be on the oppressed side. Undeterred by their denials, Yuki calmly announced that they would continue, dismissing Sergia's and Bridget's cries of baseless accusation as irrelevant. Both princesses remained bound, their faces contorted in distress. As if conjured by Yuki's words, a vivid scene unfolded before Sergia. Princess Marie stood dominant, a whip in hand, while Bridget knelt before her, her body trembling with pleasure as she begged to be bullied even more. Sergia watched, bound and horrified. Her eyes widened in shock as she witnessed the spectacle, the sharp crack of a whip echoing nearby. She tried to protest, to make it stop, but her words caught in her throat. The relentless whipping continued, and Sergia cried out in distress, calling it too rough. Yuki's voice, however, declared this was only the beginning, refusing to stop, especially from a particular place. Sergia was overwhelmed, her body tensing with a mix of fear and something else entirely. Overwhelmed by the spectacle, she was utterly aghast, questioning how something could stretch and flood so much, calling it an indecent flower. Yet, amidst her horror, her eyes were wide with a strange fascination, as she internally denied that she, Princess Sergia, could possibly be experiencing such a thing. A heart symbol appeared, indicating a new, unexpected sensation, and she admitted this was a first for her. With this shocking realization, Sergia, still bound, declared she wouldn't be able to return to her former self, to Her Highness Sergia, now that she knew such a thing. She repeated amazing to herself, then heard a voice telling her she no longer needed that kind of master, and to repeat yes. Even as she tried to resist, calling out Lady Sergia, the insistent voice within her declared that she no longer needed to be that person. She pleaded for them to stop, her voice filled with desperation, as Yuki, holding a doll, declared that Bridget was the only one who would ever truly fulfill her, the only one who could give love to her stubborn and distorted heart. Bridget listened, her expression unreadable. Her pleas quickly turned to a raw, guttural scream, tears streaming down her face as she vehemently insisted that Bridget could not possibly find pleasure with anyone other than herself. Bridget watched, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. As Sergia's true voice finally erupted, Yuki, standing behind her with a knowing smile and a whip in hand, acknowledged that she had at last revealed her genuine self. Yuki then commanded her to go, to embrace her beloved servant with all her might, holding nothing back, and to unleash her true desires. Sergia, still bound, looked on in stunned disbelief. Released from her bonds, Sergia immediately lunged at Bridget, pinning her to the ground. She began to strike her, repeatedly calling her a dumbass. As Bridget looked up, a faint smile playing on her lips, seemingly reveling in the assault. Bridget, still beneath her, offered a meek apology, admitting her mistake and begging for forgiveness. Sergia, however, pressed down, her gaze intense, demanding to know if Bridget would be hers for all eternity. Without waiting for an answer, Sergia struck her again, a forceful blow, accusing her of betrayal. Bridget let out a pained gasp, yet her expression remained one of perverse pleasure. Sergia continued her assault, stomping on Bridget, who was now stripped bare and on her hands and knees. Sergia furiously commanded her to acknowledge her sins and to stop deriving pleasure from the abuse. Even as Bridget's internal thoughts acknowledged the straightforward insult and violence, yet still found herself unable to stop. Sergia shrieked for silence, labeling Bridget a hopeless pervert. Bridget, however, merely smiled, provocatively asking if Sergia herself was enjoying the act of bullying. Enraged, Sergia threatened to ensure Bridget would never speak to her again in such a manner. With a whip, Sergia lashed out, demanding to know if Bridget was truly feeling the impact of her offense, all while ordering her to shut up and calling her a scumbag. Bridget, despite the repeated strikes, maintained her delighted expression, clearly reveling in the punishment. She mused that now, with a deeper understanding between the oppressor and the oppressed, their relationship could evolve further, allowing the roles to switch. It was exactly as she had anticipated. Just then, Yuki appeared, extending a hand and holding a coil of rope, her expression confident and inviting. Sergia and Marie reacted with utter shock and disbelief at Yuki's sudden appearance and the implications of her gesture, with Sergia exclaiming Yuki's name in confusion. Yuki, undeterred, smiled warmly and called out to Sergia, inviting her to come closer. Sergia, despite her initial shock, responded with a blush and an eager affirmation. As Sergia approached, Yuki swiftly used the rope to bind her, praising her as a good girl, while Marie watched, her expression a mix of concern and confusion. Now fully bound, Sergia's dress was torn, leaving her in a state of disheveled surprise, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and dazed realization. Her wide, startled eyes reflected the profound shift in her circumstances, her mouth slightly agape in disbelief. Moments later, Sergia cried out in pain as Marie stepped on her, though Marie reassured her that the initial discomfort would pass, attributing her own skill to the sensation. As Sergia lay bound, Yuki observed, stating that Sergia would soon feel good. Marie, also now bound and on the ground, questioned Yuki's actions, demanding an explanation. Yuki, however, merely smiled menacingly, a whip now in her hand, and asked Marie if she was ready. Yuki then brought the whip down upon Marie, calling her a little brat, and declaring that she was 10 years too early to go against her. As Marie cried out in agony, she continued to whip Marie, while Bridget, observing Sergia's anguished screams, found the princess's distress to be a lovely sight. Sergia, bound and helpless, could only cry out in agony, a sound Bridget found deeply satisfying. She reveled in the sight of both Sergia and Marie drowning in such shameful pleasure, declaring the scene irresistible. Yuki promised them further training together, a prospect she found immensely exciting. Her face filled with a predatory intensity, Yuki proclaimed her guidance would lead them to even higher peaks of carnal heights. Meanwhile, Marie stood calmly, observing a group of maids who appeared remarkably happy. Emil, maid blonde, maid braided, and another maid with short dark hair were among them, all smiling contentedly. Emil, wearing her glasses, pondered how Marie could so easily see through Sergia's facade. A sudden realization dawned on her. Marie was a heaven-sent sadist, a truth that both surprised and delighted her. She continued her internal monologue, concluding that Marie would never overlook anyone who possessed the qualities of the oppressed, specifically those who were masochists. The other maids listened intently, nodding in agreement. Suddenly, Emil and the other maids burst into a frantic run, excitedly calling out to Marie and begging to be included in whatever was unfolding. Emil, her face contorted in a desperate plea, yelled for them to stop, asserting that she would not let this opportunity slip away. She called out to Carnier and Lisbella, urging them to halt. She continued her determined dash, proclaiming herself Marie's undisputed number one, as the other maids followed closely behind, all rushing towards the scene where Yuki was still engaged in her training of Sergia and Marie. Still determined, Emil successfully dodged an unseen obstacle. A chronicler's note revealed that Marie's harem had increased by 2, now totaling 6 people, implying the maids' eager inclusion. Far from the bustling city, the grand Yuzuriha family vacation house stood as a serene retreat, promising tranquility. Within its peaceful grounds, Yuki reveled in the fresh air, declaring it a truly worthwhile journey. Marie, by her side, agreed, noting it had been a long time since they had been alone together, a welcome respite after the day she had escaped a poisoning attempt. As Marie leaned into her, Yuki's thoughts drifted to the overwhelming task of keeping company not only with Marie but also with Sergia, Emil, and even Bridget. She knew she was capable, but worried her body would not last if this continued. Later, as they enjoyed a quiet boat ride, Yuki reflected that managing Marie alone was a godsend, honestly, compared to the monumental effort of dealing with all 6 of them at once. However, the tranquility was short-lived. Back at the villa, Carnier, Emil, and Sergia stood waiting, greeting the new arrivals with a cheerful declaration that they had been expecting them. Yuki and Marie arrived at the entrance, their faces contorted in shock and disbelief at the unexpected sight. Yuki could only stammer a surprised, "How?" Marie, ever composed, explained that she had finished her work 3 times faster than expected and had heard from Carnier that Her Highness Marie would be staying at Lady Yuki's villa. Yuki, still reeling, turned to Emil, demanding to know why she was there as well. Yuki then confronted Carnier, reminding her that she had begged her to keep their plans a secret from Emil. Carnier, though apologetic, countered that as harem advocates, they could not allow Yuki to monopolize Marie. Yuki, defeated, conceded that she had no other choice. With the unexpected guests now settled, Carnier suggested they all enjoy a pleasurable vacation together. Yuki, a smile returning to her face, agreed, expressing her genuine gladness that Carnier had come along. She internally acknowledged that her plan to spend time alone with Marie had gone awry, but still believed there was ample opportunity at the villa to separate themselves from the other girls. Lady Yuki, she thought, must be thinking the same. Meanwhile, Carnier, observing Yuki, chuckled to herself, thinking how naive such a thought was. She intended to use this very opportunity to eliminate all the thieving cats in one swift move. Elsewhere, Marie sighed, looking utterly exhausted. With 4 of them present, she truly thought she would be able to take it easy, but it was proving to be as demanding as always. Seeing her weariness, Yuki approached Marie, offering her a drink and suggesting she take a break. Marie gratefully accepted the offer, though she wondered about the nature of the drink Yuki was holding. Carnier, however, quickly intervened, questioning what the drug-like substance could possibly be. Yuki calmly explained it was merely vanilla essence, intended for a calming effect, and suggested it was a better alternative to an alcoholic beverage if one wished for someone to relax. Instead, Carnier offered Marie a cup of herb tea she had poured, insisting it was a superior choice. Marie hesitantly accepted the tea. As the two stood side by side, Yuki remarked that she could detect the faint scent of vanilla essence in the air. Carnier sharply dismissed Yuki's observation as mere imagination, telling her to stop prying and sheath her sword. She warned Yuki of the consequences if she continued, refusing to be lumped together with the likes of her. Yuki's sword clanged as she adjusted it. With a fierce declaration, Carnier drew her own sword, stating she would show no mercy, even if Lady Yuki herself were her opponent. Yuki stood with Marie and the other companions, a look of exasperation on her face. She realized she couldn't handle these women and, at the very least, she alone had to find a way to escape the escalating chaos. Instead of engaging Carnier, she moved with sudden force, shattering a nearby window. Marie, caught completely off guard by the abrupt action, cried out in surprise. She swiftly carried Marie through the broken opening, making her escape as Carnier, Emil, and Sergia watched in stunned disbelief, unable to react to the sudden abduction. Marie, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events, could only stammer Yuki's name, while Yuki looked back with a determined, almost mischievous smirk, her intentions unclear. Yuki moved with incredible speed, a blur of motion as she carried Marie away from the mansion, leaving their companions behind. Below, Carnier, Emil, and Sergia watched in horror, shouting for Yuki to return Princess Marie, their desperate pleas echoing as Yuki vanished from sight. Some time later, Yuki arrived at a desolate, old church, its stone walls weathered and its bell tower reaching towards a cloudy sky, a place that seemed long forgotten. Inside the dilapidated structure, Marie found herself bound, looking around in confusion and asking Yuki what this strange place was. She felt a growing unease, sensing that Yuki's intentions were not simply to save her. Marie then directly questioned Yuki, asking if Bridget was involved in this sudden abduction. Yuki, with a serious expression, confirmed that there was a specific, grave reason for bringing Marie here. Marie gasped in shock as Yuki revealed her true purpose. She had brought Marie here to beg for the life of Her Highness Sergia. The reason for Yuki's desperate plea became horrifyingly clear as Sergia was revealed, bound tightly with ropes and suspended against a window, her clothes torn and her face streaked with tears. Sergia, still bound, could only watch as Marie, her face contorted in distress, struggled to speak her name, tears welling in her eyes. Marie's breath hitched as she whispered, "Dear sister." Despite her own predicament, Sergia cried out, urging Marie to hold on, promising to free her. She demanded to know who would inflict such a fate upon her, but then, a sudden realization struck her, and she vehemently declared that Marie was wrong about something. Indeed, Sergia was not truly a captive. She was tied to the cross-like structure by her own will, proclaiming loudly that she wanted to be bound, and in a good way at that. Yuki stood nearby, observing her. Yuki then turned to Marie, offering an apology to Your Highness Marie. She explained that they were in a remote location, just the two of them, implying a private matter. Marie looked on, confused. Marie, still reeling from Sergia's bizarre declaration, found herself unable to feel good about the situation at all. Yuki continued, revealing their plan to engage in notoriously immoral and indecent bondage play in a church. Sergia, still tied, listened with a blush. Sergia, now fully embracing her role, declared the stage was Marie's, urging her to take it. She then complained that getting tied up by this shithead only hurt, lamenting that Yuki couldn't do anything right. Yuki, bowing deeply, offered her apologies, while Marie remained stunned, refusing to help with their perverted play. Overwhelmed by the unfolding absurdity and the unexpected nature of the situation, Marie's tears flowed freely as she pleaded with her dear sister not to say such heartless things. Sergia, however, seemed unconcerned by Marie's distress, declaring that she was climbing the peak of carnal desire and had her own problems with lecherous fools. She dismissed Marie's concerns, stating she had no intention of defying her, even though she was doing as Marie said. A rumbling sound accompanied her words. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Emil, with a menacing glare, warned Bridget to calm down, implying her hands might just slip against those who made Her Highness Sergia cry. Bridget, looking shocked, tried to interject, but Emil made it clear she had no intention of helping with their play. Suddenly, Carnier, Emil, and Bridget, along with other maids, burst into the scene, rushing forward with desperate cries for Our Lady Marie to be returned to them. She glared at Marie, Emil, and Bridget, accusing them of being thieving cats and demanding to know why they were there. Carnier reminded them that she was Marie's childhood friend, implying a deeper claim to Marie's affection. Marie shrieked in protest as Emil and Bridget, ignoring Carnier's words, rushed forward, declaring that they too were Marie's maids and deserved to be included. They insisted that Carnier could not get ahead of herself. As they closed in, multiple hands reached out, grabbing Marie and pulling at her, causing her to cry out in distress. The struggle intensified as Emil, Bridget, and Carnier each pulled at Marie, claiming her as their own. Yuki, observing the chaos, also asserted her ownership, declaring Marie was hers. Marie, caught in the middle, screamed in agony, fearing she would be torn apart. Suddenly, Marie was flung through the air, landing hard as the maids continued their frantic struggle, each determined to possess her. She cried out, calling them swines and begging them to stop. Amidst the chaos, Sergia, now completely unclad, emerged and declared she would deal with all of them simultaneously. Marie's maids, far from being deterred, seemed to find the situation exhilarating, their eyes filled with hearts as they clamored for Lady Marie. Later, as the morning light filtered through the windows of the church, birds chirped softly outside, signaling the passage of time. Inside, all 6 women, Marie, Sergia, Yuki, Emil, Bridget, and Carnier, lay intertwined and unclad in a large bed, fast asleep, the previous night's events having evidently concluded. Marie slowly awoke, her eyes widening in a dawning realization. She had done it again, with all 6 of them, and in a church, of all places. She lay there, utterly exhausted, feeling she had reached her limits in more ways than one. A door creaked open, its sound echoing softly in the quiet chamber. Footsteps, light and deliberate, tapped against the floor, approaching the bed where Marie and her companions slept. Unaware of the intrusion, Marie's face remained serene, a faint, peaceful smile gracing her lips as she continued to dream. Yet, a flicker of awareness stirred within her. Her eyes slowly opened, a hint of confusion clouding her gaze as she began to awaken. She struggled to move, a strange sensation of being held preventing her from stirring freely. It felt like sleep paralysis, yet her body remembered this peculiar feeling, a sense of being restrained by something unseen. Suddenly, her surroundings shifted dramatically. Her eyes snapped open in terror, finding herself no longer in the soft bed but instead, her head was clamped within the wooden stock of a guillotine, surrounded by ominous hooded figures. She screamed in protest, her voice raw with disbelief and fear. "Why am I on the guillotine yet again?" she cried, demanding to be released immediately. Her full name, Marie Auvergne Lilian, echoing in her mind as she desperately sought an explanation. Standing before her, a stern woman in a military-style uniform declared, "We will now carry out your execution." She added that while it was not a formal execution, Marie could speak her final words until the end. She stared at the woman, a chilling recognition dawning upon her. This was the same woman who, time and again, had carried out her execution by the guillotine. The officer stood tall, her presence commanding. Her name was Lefine Henri, a penal execution officer, and her gaze was unwavering. Her gaze remained fixed, sharp, and unyielding, as Lefine Henri prepared for the execution. Meanwhile, Marie, still bound to the guillotine, shrieked accusations, demanding to know what Lefine was blabbering about. She insisted that this was not a formal execution but murder, a major crime, especially against royalty, and questioned if Lefine truly understood the gravity of her actions. Lefine, turning from the window, calmly dismissed Marie's outburst, asking if she had finished speaking. Marie, however, vehemently declared that she had not, demanding that Lefine not kill her until she had said everything she needed to say. Marie continued her frantic plea, asserting that she was no longer the old Marie, but had been reborn as a perfect, graceful, and virtuous princess, beloved by all the citizens of the kingdom. She argued that if she were to die, the people would weep, and therefore, there was no longer any reason to sentence her. Lefine listened, her expression unchanged. Still desperate, Marie cried out that she had more to say, offering Lefine anything she wished for, abundant financial and political power, if only she would name it. Lefine, with a slight tilt of her head, questioned if that was truly all Marie had to offer. Marie, her face contorted in a mix of fear and determination, insisted that her very existence was valuable and that it would surely benefit Lefine more not to kill her, promising position, honor, or even men. Lefine again asked if Marie was finished. Marie, now almost hysterical, reiterated that her death would be a great loss for the kingdom, given that she had been hailed as a peerless beauty since birth, adored by royalties and nobilities alike, even recalling how her first male tutor had been overcome with pleasure by her presence. Lefine then offered a small, knowing smile, remarking that Marie's abnormally strong attachment to life was truly wonderful and impressive. Marie, seeing a glimmer of hope, tentatively asked if Lefine would then spare her. Lefine's expression hardened, her eyes cold and resolute, as she delivered her final, chilling command, "Die." Her command was swiftly carried out. A sharp, metallic chop echoed, and Marie's eyes widened in a final, horrified gasp as blood splattered. A piercing scream tore through the silence, a raw expression of terror and disbelief, as the realization of another execution by guillotine dawned upon her. She awoke in a lavish bed, her eyes scanning the opulent room with a sense of déjà vu, recognizing the familiar surroundings. A fleeting thought of Yuki crossed her mind. Still naked and disoriented, She was surprised by the sudden appearance of her maids, Emil, Carriage, Sergia, and Bridget, who arrived with fresh clothes and light-hearted comments about her wild night. Internally, she despaired at the thought of facing the guillotine yet again. She dismissed their concerns with a wave of her hand, declaring that their current situation was nothing compared to Yuki's sword or Sergia's poison. With an imperious tone, she commanded Carriage and Lisbella to bring Lefine Henri to her immediately. Meanwhile, Lefine, clad in her military uniform, reflected on her past execution by Marie. She resolved that this time, she would seduce the woman, no matter the cost, viewing it as a task beneath her, akin to the duties of commoners or even Emil. She, now seated and fanning herself, confidently believed that Marie would fall for her instantly if she simply showed her a little kindness. Lefine then arrived, accompanied by Emil and Carriage, but her uniform was splattered with blood, a stark contrast to the elegant surroundings. Marie, surprised by her bloodied appearance, questioned her attire, finding it disrespectful. Lefine knelt, offering formal greetings, but Marie quickly dismissed them. Marie observed the blood on her uniform, realizing it belonged to a prisoner. Lefine explained that she had rushed directly from work and had not even had time to change. Still covered in the grim evidence of her duties, Lefine declared that she could not be approached in such a state and required immediate cleansing from the filth. Two maids, Sergia and Emil, acknowledged her command. Without hesitation, the maids eagerly began to strip Lefine of her blood-stained uniform, guiding her towards the bath chamber with enthusiastic cries. They pointed excitedly towards the entrance, ensuring Lefine knew precisely where her cleansing awaited. Meanwhile, Marie, already submerged in a bath filled with countless rose petals, inquired about the water temperature, proudly stating that she had prepared everything specifically for Lefine. As Lefine settled into the fragrant water, she observed the sheer volume of blossoms, remarking that Marie must have purchased every rose in the entire city. Marie, her voice soft and alluring, confessed that she had been watching Lefine for a very long time. She continued to lavish Lefine with compliments, praising her beauty, describing her body as sculpted like a statue, and her skin as pristine as a painting. Marie then moved closer, gently touching Lefine, declaring her a true work of art, and subtly contrasting Lefine's perfection with her own perceived flaws. Lefine, seemingly overwhelmed by the attention and the lavish gesture, appeared to tremble with a quiet joy, a reaction Marie noted with a knowing gaze. Marie's expression shifted to a confident, almost predatory smile, as she internally mused on how effortlessly Lefine was falling into her trap, finding her target to be too easy and unforgivable in her naivety. The city was overflowing with people suffering in poverty, yet the princess, who should set an example, indulged in lavish displays. She remained in the rose bath, internally observing Lefine's reaction, while Lefine, for her part, seethed at the waste of tax money on such extravagance. Suddenly, Marie splashed water, startling Lefine. Lefine, regaining her composure, declared she had a duty to perform and must take her leave, exiting the bath. Marie, watching her depart, internally acknowledged that her plan had unexpectedly backfired, yet a hint of annoyance crossed her features. As she walked away from the opulent building under the moonlight, Lefine mused that Marie was not as easily swayed as Emil. She soon found herself walking through the dimly lit streets of the slums, where the impoverished inhabitants huddled around fires, observing her with curiosity and whispers. As she continued her journey, a luxurious carriage approached from behind. A hand suddenly reached out, grabbing her, while onlookers commented on her beauty, unaware of the impending danger. Lefine cried out in surprise as she was forcibly pulled into the carriage, struggling against her unseen captors. She demanded to know what they were doing and who they were. Still struggling, her mouth covered, she managed to utter a muffled warning not to mess with her. She questioned their goal, assuming they sought money, and defiantly asked if they truly believed they could get away with this. Inside, Lefine found herself restrained by Marie's maids, Sergia and Emil, while Marie herself held her down. Marie leaned in close, her voice a chilling whisper, revealing that what she truly desired was Lefine Henri's body. Lefine stared in shock at Marie, who, with a sinister smile, asked if she truly believed she could escape. Marie then declared that if they were to get intimate, there would be no more need for tactics. She leaned in close to Lefine, a predatory smile gracing her lips, declaring that this was indeed the quickest way to achieve her desires. She continued, asserting that with her incredible technique, Lefine, like all other women, was as good as hers the moment she took her to bed. Lefine remained held captive by Marie's loyal maids. As she declared her intent to completely break Lefine's body and soul, Marie floated above them in a state of ecstatic power, while her maids held Lefine firmly in place. Lefine, however, pleaded desperately for Marie to stop, her face contorted in terror. Marie merely dismissed her pleas, questioning if Lefine truly believed she would halt her plans after coming this far. Meanwhile, a carriage sped through the night, its coachman expressing gratitude for the food he was transporting. Inside, Lefine lay bound and gagged, her muffled cries unheard as the carriage moved under the pale moonlight. The carriage continued its journey, traversing a scenic coastal road, leaving the city behind. Inside, Lefine remained bound, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and despair, her mouth agape in a silent, desperate scream. Soon, the carriage arrived at its destination. Marie observed Lefine, who was now surrounded by other women, all seemingly unconscious or subdued. A smirk played on Marie's lips, a sign of her satisfaction. Lefine then awoke to find herself naked and bound, lying amidst several other naked, unconscious women, including Marie's maids and other familiar faces. Marie, also unclothed, stood over them, dismissing Lefine's previous resistance as mere empty words and reflecting on the Henri family's renowned sexual technique. Marie, now wearing Lefine's military uniform, revealed her true profession, stating that she was, in fact, a doctor. She continued to explain her expertise, claiming to understand the human body, especially the subtleties of sexual sensation, better than anyone. Lefine, lying exposed, struggled with the realization that she had been unable to find satisfaction with men lately, a thought that caused her distress. She further revealed that she had heard rumors of Lefine's debauchery and her alleged practice of turning women into sex slaves. Lefine, horrified, recognized the woman before her as the source of these unsettling reports. Lefine's thoughts raced, acknowledging that Marie was not an easy opponent and was, in fact, too strong to overcome easily. The imposing mansion where she was held stood as a symbol of Marie's power. She realized Marie was different from the other women who had fallen victim to her. As a group of women, some in maid uniforms and others partially clothed, were shown in various states of distress and ecstasy, seemingly under Marie's influence. Lefine, still grappling with her predicament, wondered what she should do, her mind racing for a solution. Outside the mansion, Yuki stood, also contemplating the situation, asking herself the same question. Lefine, now completely unclothed and visibly distraught, desperately questioned how she could survive this ordeal. Two hooded figures stood nearby, observing her. Moments later, Lefine found herself restrained within a guillotine, her head locked in place. Marie stood before the execution device, surrounded by several silent, hooded figures. Marie's gaze was cold and unwavering, her full name, Marie Auvergne Lilian, echoing in the air. She declared that she would now carry out Lefine's execution. Lefine, her head still in the guillotine, was offered last words by Marie, who clarified that this was not an official sentence but still wished to hear anything Lefine might want to say. Lefine, bewildered, could only utter a confused what. Lefine, her head secured in the guillotine, glared defiantly. She challenged her executioners, urging them to hurry and complete the act if they truly wished her dead. She vowed that no matter what, she would die and return again, ensuring she would take them down next time. Marie observed Lefine with a subtle, knowing smile. She acknowledged Lefine Henri by name, instructing her to simply wait with her neck ready for the inevitable. Lefine, still trapped, closed her eyes, a serene expression on her face, and declared that this, too, must be her fate. Marie, looking down at the condemned woman, admitted she had underestimated the princess. She noted Lefine's unwavering resolve, even in such a desperate state. Lefine, hearing this, looked up with a slight, questioning sound. Marie continued, expressing awe at such a steely spirit, one prepared to accept her own death, despite being the very princess responsible for countless lives. With a dramatic flourish, Marie raised her arm, praising Lefine's noble soul and questioning how she could possibly refrain from admiring her. Yet, her expression quickly shifted. Marie then wondered aloud why Lefine was getting so worked up by herself, questioning if she was an idiot, especially considering the tragic wish passed down from her own mother. Suddenly, Marie's face contorted into a mask of pure fury, her eyes wide and wild as she shrieked that Lefine still must die. Moments later, Lefine awoke with a gasp, naked and disoriented, her body sprawled on what appeared to be a bed. She screamed in shock, realizing she had resurrected. Still reeling, she called out, asking if Emil was there. A voice confirmed Emil's presence. Lefine winced, admitting it hurt a little, but quickly added that she was already used to the guillotine. Emil burst into the room, her face beaming with a wide smile as she announced her presence to Marie. Marie, however, wasted no time, immediately instructing Emil to investigate a particular woman. Emil, considering the request, affirmed her understanding. Indeed, Emil's investigative abilities had proven invaluable in the past, saving Marie on one occasion, and her skills had been the decisive factor in the downfall of both Sergia and Yuki. Her competence was, in fact, unmatched throughout the entire kingdom. Marie's hands intertwined delicately as she softly called out to her dear Emil. Leaning in intimately, Marie declared Emil to be the only person she truly loved, asserting that this very request was essential to deepen their bond. She then asked if Emil would fulfill it out of love for her. Emil, seemingly captivated, offered a gentle smile. Unexpectedly, Emil abruptly refused Marie's request, accusing her of merely seeking to seduce another woman and exploiting her for personal convenience. Marie, taken aback, could only utter a surprised sound. Her expression hardened, her resolve clear as she declared she would not be fooled again. Marie, still reeling from the unexpected rejection, called out to Emil, but she simply turned and walked away, leaving Marie utterly speechless. Alone, Marie gazed forward, a new thought dawning on her as she wondered if this unexpected turn of events was perhaps. She pondered the situation, a sudden realization dawning upon her. Was it truly a dead end? She concluded, with a hint of surprise, that it was completely so. Previously, Marie had attempted to use Emil for her own schemes, but was rejected. Now, she stands with Emil, reflecting on past events. Despite the setback, she resolved that since things had come to this, she would personally investigate Lefine Henri. She muttered about the two of them being too much, wondering what kind of evil they truly were. To blend in and erase any royal aura, Marie, Emil, and Sergia decided they needed to wear tattered, dirty clothes. Emil and Sergia eagerly presented the worn garments, while Marie, still in her hooded disguise, looked on with a hint of exasperation. She then identified a building as a clinic, a medical facility, and wondered if they should enter. Entering the bustling clinic, Marie felt a headache coming on, declaring her condition to be the worst. Inside, Lefine, with her blonde braid, calmly informed the waiting crowd that patients would be seen in order. Marie observed her, noting that Lefine was indeed at the clinic. The clinic was unexpectedly thriving, filled with many patients. Lefine, diligently writing, suggested to one patient that she would prescribe medicine for their prevalent illness. Another patient, an old man, grumbled about the high cost of medicine, claiming he didn't need it. However, Lefine calmly stated that no payment was necessary. She insisted that they first cure their illness, and only then would they discuss anything further. An old woman, enraged, questioned Lefine's motives, demanding to know why she, an executioner, would try to help people without money, suggesting it would be better to just kill them. Lefine simply looked at her, asking if she truly didn't know. An old man, however, intervened, placing a comforting hand on the old woman's shoulder. He asserted that this Lefine-chan was completely different from other doctors or executioners. Lefine then declared that she was indeed an executioner, a human of noble birth, born into the Henri family with the destiny to serve as the kingdom's executioner. She acknowledged the fear she instilled in the common people. Yet, she passionately proclaimed that her true wish was to save all lives. Marie, observing from the shadows, noted that Lefine remained unchanged, still true to herself. She passionately declared her true wish to abolish the death penalty and use the Henri family's superior medical skills to aid the poor. Marie, listening intently, could only utter a bewildered "huh," as Lefine's fervent desire to see that day come to pass filled the air. Following her impassioned plea, Lefine stood among the grateful villagers, one elderly man, now healed, advocating on her behalf. He urged the others to join him in appealing for the abolition of the death penalty, now that his illness had been cured. She gently took the old man's hands, acknowledging that he, as a patient, understood the preciousness of life more than anyone. The crowd erupted in cheers, with the old man leading the cries of "Lefine! Long live Lefine! We support the abolition of the death penalty." Marie, witnessing the fervent support, could only stare in utter disbelief, questioning what exactly was happening. Marie's mind reeled, unable to reconcile Lefine's current stance with her past actions. She questioned how Lefine Henri, an executioner who had carried out countless sentences, could possibly be an abolitionist. A chilling realization dawned on her. Perhaps she knew Lefine's true nature better than she thought. Something had shifted, a change in fate, as if guided by the roll of dice, all for the sake of a woman who wished for the abolition of the death penalty. Moments later, Marie, now clad in a hooded cloak, found herself before a looming guillotine. She defiantly declared that no one could execute her, bidding farewell to the grim apparatus. Hooded figures watched silently, while Lefine observed her with an unreadable expression. Yet, despite her defiance, she was soon positioned beneath the blade, her head secured in the stock of the guillotine. Lefine stood directly before her, her back to the onlookers, as the hooded figures surrounded the execution platform. Marie, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief, screamed at Lefine, demanding to know why she, an advocate for abolishing the death penalty, would execute her. Lefine, her expression cold and resolute, simply stated that no explanation was necessary. With a chilling command, she ordered the execution to proceed, leaving Marie utterly horrified by the sudden, brutal turn of events. The night sky hung heavy, illuminated by a full moon, as an unseen voice questioned the unfolding events, demanding to know what was truly happening. Under the same moon, a figure clad in dark, agile attire stood within the Henri family courtyard, her masked gaze fixed upon the estate. She pondered Lefine's inscrutable mind, lamenting that events seemed to have reverted to a cycle of death, repeating without end. Peeking from behind a corner, her sharp eyes narrowed, and she concluded that a more thorough investigation was imperative. Meanwhile, Lefine herself stood outside the Henri residence, her usual military attire replaced by a simple white gown, as she gazed up at the full moon. The masked observer watched Lefine, recognizing her instantly. She questioned Lefine's presence, alone in a warehouse at such a late hour, wondering what she could possibly be doing. Her eyes, now wide with a mix of emotion, focused intently as she softly called out, "Mama." The cold, stark structure of a guillotine dominated the space, its heavy blade poised high above. Standing completely nude before the imposing guillotine, her discarded clothes a heap at her feet, the young woman spoke to her "Mama," declaring that she had performed her work well today. Her hand extended slightly, as if reaching for an unseen presence. The young woman, previously seen at the guillotine, now leaned against a wall, her eyes closed in distress as she softly called out, "Mama." Her eyes then snapped open, wide with a mix of shock and pain, as she acknowledged the hurt, lamenting, "Ah, it hurt, didn't it? It's terrible, you got hurt. Poor thing. Just wait a moment." Her eyes closed in a blissful smile, her tongue slightly visible, as she whispered, "We'll be together forever, Mama." Her distress intensified as she muttered, "To be so excited about the guillotine and call Mama is too much. This is not someone who can be reasoned with." With a grim resolve, she concluded, "If it comes to this, I'll use force." Her resolve hardened, and she produced a knife, gripping it firmly. Her expression was fierce and determined as she declared, "I'll kill you before I'm killed." Just then, a new, youthful officer with curly blonde hair appeared, pointing directly at her with an authoritative gaze. He demanded, "Why are you holding a knife, and what are you doing here?" He pointed a finger at her, accusing her of being suspicious and causing trouble. The woman, holding a knife, seemed taken aback by his sudden appearance and direct challenge. Before she could fully react, he delivered a powerful kick, sending her sprawling. He loudly declared himself the victim and ordered her to come with him, asserting his authority. Standing over him as he lay on the ground, she scathingly called him a brat and demanded to know if he was a kidnapper. He, in turn, told her to be quiet, attempting to explain his identity. She continued to shout, explaining that she was on night patrol to protect Lefine-sama. He listened intently, then questioned the term, asking, "Night patrol?" He then bowed deeply, offering a sincere apology for his earlier suspicion. He admitted it was unreasonable to doubt her words and declared that he now believed her. She closed her eyes, seemingly accepting his apology. She told him that while she didn't know who he was, she was glad he had listened. She then directly asked him for his identity. He looked up, stating that he had something to hide. He then proudly introduced himself as friend Lesh, a disciple of Lefine's sensei. She acknowledged his claim of being a disciple, but noted that Lefine had not yet formally recognized him as such. He clarified that he had come to assist with Lefine sensei's work today. She then inquired if he was a doctor. He pointed a finger, emphatically stating that Lefine sensei was a top-class executioner. He then accused her of being pitifully ignorant of Lefine's true nature, which visibly shocked her. He continued, boasting that he knew everything about Lefine's sensei. He revealed her dual role as a royal physician and the head of royal executioners since the age of 14, having performed the most executions in history, and was even feared by the guillotine itself. She listened, her expression one of profound shock. He explained that Lefine was a compassionate individual who sent petitions to the royal palace daily, even on behalf of criminals. Observer_1 listened intently, then questioned, "A petition?" He further clarified that these were petitions to abolish the death penalty. As he spoke, Observer_1 felt a flicker of recognition, realizing she had heard the name, phrase somewhere before. However, a flashback revealed a different side of Lefine. She scoffed at the notion of daily petitions to abolish the death penalty, questioning who would possess such an abundance of free time for such a trivial pursuit. Young_officer_1 looked on, visibly distressed by her callous words. She continued, her expression cold, asserting that if the death penalty were abolished, it would become impossible to rid oneself of unpleasant family members. Her chilling logic further disturbed Young_officer_1. In a brutal display, Lefine was shown kicking Young_officer_1 while he lay on the ground, calling him a fool and declaring that he had brought this misfortune entirely upon himself. Observer_1 watched the scene unfold, completely horrified by the cruelty. In a moment of reflection, within the royal palace's Karstein executive office, the first princess, Karstein, received a petition. It was a plea to abolish the death penalty, a document that had recently arrived at the palace. She regarded the petition with a serious gaze, a silent acknowledgement that such appeals arrived daily, without fail. Meanwhile, the third princess, Sergia, reacted with a disgusted expression to the idea of daily petitions, finding it repulsive. Yet, her demeanor quickly shifted as she then expressed admiration for the passionate individual behind such a persistent effort, finding it wonderful. She continued, asserting that it was a good idea and that she supported the proposal, believing that everyone had the right to live. Karstein listened intently to her sister's words. Elsewhere, the second princess, Marie, read the same petition with a dismissive smile, finding the very notion laughable. She declared that the punishment of criminals was a duty of the state and a responsibility of the royal family, and she would never acknowledge such a foolish petition. Karstein observed her sister's unwavering conviction. The third princess, Sergia, reacted with an outburst of absolute denial and a frantic, almost maniacal laugh, refusing to accept Marie's stance. The scene then shifted abruptly to the present, focusing on the grand exterior of Marie's palace. Inside, Sergia, now in a revealing outfit, burst through a doorway, her voice echoing as she frantically called out for Emil. Still frantic, she continued her desperate search, now almost completely undressed, shouting Emil Trousseau's full name and demanding to know where she was. Suddenly, Emil appeared, calm and composed, asking Sergia if she needed something. Calm as ever, Emil asked Sergia what she needed. Sergia, still in a state of undress, frantically demanded that Emil gather all records pertaining to the abolition of the death penalty, a cause Sergia herself had opposed. She insisted on an explanation later, but for now, the task was urgent. She further pressed Emil, emphasizing the need to abuse the secretary's authority and collect even the most trivial daily records, leaving nothing out. Emil, with a slight bow, acknowledged the command, stating she had been waiting for such a task. Moments later, Emil presented Sergia with an enormous stack of documents, confirming that these were all the records related to Marie's opposition to the death penalty. Sergia, still undressed, looked at the towering pile with a mix of awe and determination. Sergia, now partially covered by a cloak, embraced Emil, praising her as the most reliable person she knew. Emil, with a gentle smile, accepted the compliment. Emil, blushing slightly, expressed gratitude for Sergia's kind words, stating that she would gladly accept such affection. Sergia, still in her state of undress, then began to burn the massive pile of documents in a fireplace, the flames roaring high. Emil watched her, a subtle smile playing on her lips. Emil's eyes widened, a look of intense satisfaction on her face as she declared the concealment complete. As the flames consumed the evidence, Sergia experienced a terrifying vision. A full moon hung in the night sky, and she saw herself, bound and gagged, being dragged by hooded figures. She heard a voice, filled with malice, declaring that the bitch would not be killed, but rather swallowed whole. The vision shifted to Lefine, her face contorted in a cruel smile. The vision continued, showing Lefine standing before a guillotine, while Sergia's head, adorned with a small crown, lay in the execution device, a look of resignation on her face. Lefine offered a mocking apology. Lefine, now back in the present, reflected on the vision, realizing that such minor efforts would not change fate. She wondered what it would take to alter such a destiny, her eyes narrowing in thought. A group of cloaked figures stood in a dimly lit chamber, their faces hidden by deep hoods. At their center, a younger figure, also cloaked, with short, light, curly hair and piercing eyes, stared ahead with an unwavering gaze. The central figure from the group suddenly screamed, her face contorted in a furious outburst. She recalled a past encounter, remembering a masked woman with long blonde hair, dressed in a black, ninja-like outfit, who had obstructed her at the back of Lefine's clinic. The hooded figure demanded to know the masked woman's name, her voice filled with rage. Her desperate cries echoed as she looked up, pleading with Marie Auvergne Lilian, who stood above her. The hooded figure, now identified as Fran, implored Marie to help her immediately, questioning if she would truly abandon her. Marie, however, responded with a sharp accusation, revealing that Fran was, in fact, a princess. She expressed her anger at being deceived, stating that such matters were irrelevant now. Marie then declared that she must be helped, and that Fran should respect either her or Lefine. Marie's voice grew harsher as she condemned Fran's actions, declaring that killing a member of the royal family was a capital offense. Fran, shocked, questioned what Marie was saying, asserting that she would no longer be manipulated. The hooded figures surrounding Fran began to question her, asking if she knew Princess Marie and why she was speaking to her so intimately. They wondered if she was a spy from the royal palace, their suspicion evident in their expressions. Fran, visibly shaken, could only utter a small sound of disbelief. Two of the hooded figures, one with a beard and another younger, exchanged glances, expressing their long-standing distrust of Fran. They had always found it strange that someone not from an executioner's lineage would aspire to be one. Fran, looking away, seemed to plead for them to wait and believe her. Marie stepped forward, her arms outstretched, vehemently defending Fran against the accusations of being a spy. She declared that such a thing was impossible, stating that while she didn't know all the details, she knew Fran well. Marie asserted that Fran was undoubtedly being deceived by an evil princess. In the background, two hooded figures held a distraught Fran. Marie then embraced Fran, holding her close as she addressed the hooded figures. She took full responsibility for not protecting Fran from the royal family's evil influence, imploring them to forgive her. Fran, looking up at Marie, seemed to call out to her. She explained to Fran that their worlds were fundamentally different, a truth she believed Fran now understood. Meanwhile, the hooded figures continued to press Fran, reminding her that her past was a dark one, a past that made her a resident of the shadows, not one who walked in the light. Marie, attempting to intervene, urged Fran to leave the place, but the young officer vehemently refused, declaring her unwavering resolve to become an executioner. Her face contorted in distress, Marie pleaded for release, dismissing the accusations against her as mere theatrics and demanding to be freed immediately. Ignoring Marie's pleas, Fran approached a rack of weapons and carefully selected a large, formidable sword. Her eyes narrowed with fierce determination, even as the hooded figures continued to question the impossibility of her ambition. With the heavy sword in hand, she advanced towards a waiting guillotine, where Marie's head was now secured, declaring her intention to prove her capabilities right then and there. Marie's eyes widened in terror, her voice a desperate cry for Fran to stop, to wait. But Fran ignored her pleas, raising the massive, rusted sword high above her head, ready to strike. Marie shrieked, fearing the immense pain such a blade would inflict. Fran's face was a mask of grim resolve as she declared her intent to personally execute Marie. She, the young officer, raised her large executioner's sword high, declaring that if she proceeded, her mentor would bear no guilt for the royal family's death. She commanded Marie, trapped in the guillotine, to open her eyes, insisting that if she truly intended to carry out the execution, she must aim properly. Marie, her face contorted in terror, could only scream in protest. She continued to shout, her voice echoing across the square, demanding that Marie simply die. Surrounding her, the hooded figures remained silent witnesses to the grim spectacle unfolding before the grand castle. Elsewhere, a wave of excruciating pain washed over Sergia, causing her to writhe and scream in agony, her body bare and vulnerable. She slowly regained her composure, sitting up on a bed, her hands covering her head. She reflected on the ordeal, realizing it had been a death far crueler than any poison Sarthia could administer. A chilling realization dawned upon her. Her terror resurfaced, causing her to scream uncontrollably as she sat on the bed, her body trembling, having involuntarily soiled herself in sheer fright. She continued to shriek, denying the indignity of her current state, refusing to believe that she, a princess of the century, could be subjected to such a humiliating experience. Behind her, other captive women huddled together, equally distressed. She, her face contorted in a furious snarl, held Marie captive, declaring her intent to inflict punishment. Marie, tears streaming down her face, could only whimper in despair. Yuki's gaze, however, held a complex mix of anger and possessive desire, as she mused that while today's intensity was high, she had long yearned to add such spice to their interactions, especially if Marie herself desired it. Moments later, the two lay together in bed, the morning light filtering through the window. Marie, still visibly distressed, averted her gaze from Yuki, who watched her with a quiet intensity. Marie found herself alone in the vast bed, her expression heavy with regret. She lamented her repeated actions, questioning if her current reality was merely a delusion, a temporary escape that resolved nothing. A deep sense of responsibility settled upon her, realizing she needed to act, and she silently apologized to Yuki for the turmoil she had caused. Yuki, now more composed, explained her recent absence, attributing it to her noble duties which required her presence at various inspections. She confessed her longing to spend more time with Marie, then proposed a solution. They should visit the villa together again soon. Marie, considering Yuki's suggestion, agreed that they should indeed spend time alone together. She believed such an opportunity would allow them to grow closer, a sentiment Yuki acknowledged with a thoughtful hum. Marie affirmed her resolve, her expression a mix of determination and contemplation. The following day, the grand facade of Marie's mansion stood under a clear sky. Inside, a young maid, Bridget, called out, searching for her mistress. Within the opulent halls, Emil, Lisbella, and Bridget stood by as a new maid, her blonde hair braided, announced the arrival of Lefine Henri, brought in according to instructions. Marie, meanwhile, reclined gracefully on a chaise lounge, observing the proceedings. Marie, now seated opposite Lefine and sipping tea, addressed her with formal deference, acknowledging the honor of Lefine's visit. Yet, her tone carried an underlying weariness, hinting at the considerable difficulties she currently faced. Lefine, her military uniform crisp and her gaze unwavering, delivered a direct command to Marie. She was to become Lefine's personal physician. Lefine's command hung in the air, leaving Marie wide-eyed and stunned. She had just asked if Marie had not heard her, reiterating that from this day forward, Marie was to work as her personal physician and reside within the royal palace. She then firmly declared that Marie would indeed serve as her exclusive physician. Marie, still reeling, internally questioned the implications of leaving her post as head executioner and moving into the royal palace. Lefine, oblivious to Marie's internal turmoil, added that such a position would bring great honor. Leaning closer, she clarified that Marie's duties as an executioner were temporarily suspended. All she required was for Marie to remain by her side as her personal physician. Marie's expression remained one of disbelief. Marie, attempting to regain her composure, respectfully countered that the royal palace surely housed many more distinguished physicians, and indeed, numerous other qualified individuals. Lefine, however, simply dismissed her concerns with a confident "it's fine." Undeterred, she continued, asserting that Marie's medical skills far surpassed those of the palace physicians. She claimed Marie was like a divine figure to them, someone they could rely on without resorting to superstition. She further explained that Marie possessed the unique ability to calmly address past ailments, and it was precisely for this reason that she was needed. Marie looked down, her thoughts unreadable. Lefine's gaze intensified, her expression becoming almost predatory as she declared there was nothing about Marie that remained unknown to her. Marie looked up, startled by the sheer possessiveness in Lefine's words. She pressed on, stating that Marie's very existence was indispensable, and that truly, Marie was the only one in the entire country capable of being Lefine's personal physician. Marie's eyes widened further in shock. With a knowing smile, she then revealed that the results of her investigation into Marie were excessively thorough. She then asked Marie directly if she would obey her, Lefine. Marie remained frozen, utterly stunned.